So again, as this morning, we won't have a meditation. Instead, we'll just go through dependent arising, because Deepak is his last day, and I want him to hear everything about dependent arising. So, and then we have the chance to meditate on it later. Okay, so, therefore, we had this discussion this morning. Hopefully that was helpful. Just to get a sense of how just knowing the causes and conditions of something helps us to understand better. And thus that solid sense of someone bad, good, etc. And so that hatred just doesn't hold. Can't hold. It's not going to, right? Just on its own, because it needs that sense of solidity that something just is good, bad, and so on. Does that make sense? Okay. So when I gave this explanation, so for instance, for example, people who are prone to, I just wrote this, I read this because I can read it, sounds better when I read it than if I try to explain it. So people who are prone to aggressive behavior are not naturally or inherently aggressive, but this character trait is the result of a number of causes and conditions, such as their biological predispositions, possibly in the form of DNA, the environment in which they grew up, the mental tendency they developed in previous lives or in this life, and so on. Yeah? So it's not the person that they're inherently this, that, and the other, but it's the DNA they're born with, it's the environment they grew up in, but it's also the tendency that come from a previous life. And oftentimes, like I said, nowadays in the West, I mean, not just in the West, anywhere in the world now, where the differences have become, the differences are a lot less between the cultures. Unfortunately, it's all kind of pretty much American culture, I should say. And I say unfortunately, not because there's anything wrong with American culture. I'm just saying the other cultures kind of get a little bit lost. So yeah, Indian culture has changed, German culture, everything has changed. Anyway, so therefore, so the way, what I was trying to say is like we make our parents, for instance, responsible. And that is probably true. But we shouldn't forget, if they mess us up, then our grandparents messed them up. So then to also remember, they didn't choose, oh, I'm going to mess up my children. Got nothing better to do. No, of course not. That's not what happened. All right. And so this is true for people here who are prone to aggressive behavior, but also a sprout. The classic example, it does not exist naturally or inherently just as a sprout, because it's the result of its causes, such as a seed and its conditions like soil, water, sunlight, and so on. All right. And if we take the contemplation of dependence on causes and conditions, if we take the contemplation of dependence on causes and conditions to a subtler level of ultimate analysis, right, we also come to see that despite our sense that there is a truly existent first moment of the sprout, it is impossible to find that moment. So we say like something comes into existence. There's a moment when it's there. But let's take you back to this image, this example I gave you of all the photographs lined up next to each other. When is exactly the first moment of the sprout? If you analyze, the closer the look, the more precision you want, the more you're left with, can't find it. Where's that exact first moment? Because as Tyler mentioned before, or no, it wasn't Tyler, who was it? Said like each moment can be subdivided. It was Nitzan, right? Each moment can be subdivided again into smaller moments, and again, so where's the exact moment? Impossible to pinpoint, right? Okay. So that despite our sense that there's a truly existent first moment of that thing called sprout, it is impossible to find that moment. It is not possible to determine the exact moment when the cause of the sprout ceases to exist. It's no longer a seed, and now the sprout has come into existence. There's another reason, but I haven't mentioned that yet. There's another reason why it's impossible to determine which of these photographs is now the first moment of the sprout.
Is it also because everything is simultaneous?
No, not everything is simultaneous. The seed is not simultaneous to its result, the sprout. Not everything is simultaneous. If everything were not simultaneous, you wouldn't have time. Because time is measured by the changes that happen one after the other, right? If everything would be constantly the same, or it would all happen simultaneously, there wouldn't be time. Time is measured, or time, the concept of time exists in dependence on the basis, which are changing objects. Okay? All right. There's something else. I've never really gone into that so much. I talked about the sense that there's an inherent I, an inherent table, an inherent flower. But there are other things we never went into. An inherently old-fashioned name. I'll tell you how I came to the whole name thing. It's very funny. Now people are going to laugh about me. When I was in Israel many years ago, I went to a restaurant with a friend of mine, and I wasn't very hungry, and neither was she. So she was busy on her phone, and I was looking at the menu. And I came across a word that I thought sounded so beautiful. It's shakshuka. And I kind of said, and I knew the name Shoshana. I know it's very old-fashioned, but it wasn't old-fashioned to me. I liked Shoshana, and shakshuka was close enough. And I said, wow, if I had a daughter, I'd call her shakshuka. And my friend is laughing. So that would be like saying, if I had a girl, I would call her samosa. Something like that. It's a dish, right? It's a tomato egg dish. And I tell you, I got so much shakshuka after that, but I don't really like it. I don't like shakshuka that much, but I like the word. But the point is, to me, shakshuka just sounded beautiful. It didn't mean had nothing inherent, had no inherent meaning. To her, it meant a particular dish, so no way would you call your daughter that. Right? And samosa, now I know what samosa is, but that's also pretty. It sounds very pretty. It sounds like a girl's name, right? Samosa. I know you use it differently as well. I know. I found out. But the point is, no, it's if I didn't know. So it seems like inherently there's something in that. So to me, it was just inherently beautiful. To others, it's an inherently, you're reminded of squared, I don't know, it's kind of a momo, like an Indian type of momo, except it's squared. And so think of old-fashioned names. What are old-fashioned names? Is Parvita an old-fashioned name? Paramita? What are old-fashioned names in India? Balaji, really? Oh, that is so modern to me. Balaji. Yeah, so in English, let me think, like... Huh?
They like the hyphen names, like Anne-Marie would be, I think, an older one.
Anne-Marie?
Anne-Marie.
Yeah. Okay, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, oh, Anne-Marie, the hyphen name, Anne-Marie. Yeah, so the kind of longish names. Okay, so anyway, in German, Irmgard. My grandmother was called Irmgard. Adelgunde. That is so old-fashioned. Adel means aristocrat, so anyway, you can tell from that. Anyway, but to someone else, I remember when my little niece was called Matilda. To me, Matilda was so old-fashioned. But now it's changed, now it's to me, I'm thinking of this cute girl called Matilda. So this is how names, when I grew up, Emma was such a terrible name. So when we played with my sister, someone always had to be Emma. Emma was always stupid and overweight. And I don't know what else. She didn't know what was going on. So someone always had to be Emma. Oh, I don't know what's going on. That was Emma. And now so many cute little girls are called Emma. So it's like, it's changed. Emily, Emma were really old-fashioned when I grew up. And now Felix was old-fashioned when my parents were around. And now Felix, a lot of young boys are called Felix. So the point is, therefore, it seems that even within the names, there's something inherent within them, something findable. There's something coming from the side of the object, being old-fashioned, being cool, being fancy or whatever. And that's not true. Because otherwise, shakshuka, I would have noticed right away that it was ridiculous to call your daughter a shakshuka. Right? There's even shakshuka on some McLeodganj menus, by the way. I've seen it. Pardon? In Bakso? Oh yeah. In Dharamkot probably as well. Okay, so there's that. And then think of letters. The letter A. Really, it's just two lines with a line in the middle, and it seems it's intrinsic within it. A. But if you take these two lines and you put them upright, it's H. So it seems like something inherent. It's like you don't even have to think, that's just been labeled. It seems from its own side, shouting at us, look, I'm an A, there's B. And what about numbers? There's a beautiful YouTube video. It's quite old, it's more than 10 years old, I think. I mean, quite old. It's like old on YouTube, in YouTube's terms. So it's about 10 years old. It says, it's called, I think, the philosophy of numbers. How do numbers exist? They have three. There's this guy, he's a British mathematician. He does a great job explaining it. I'll look for the video, you can watch it if you're interested. But he asks us, what are numbers? He says there are three possibilities, like the philosophers who deal with numbers, there are three possibilities. One possibility is numbers exist somewhere in space. There is one, there's two, there's three. And because they exist somewhere in space, you can therefore count objects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The second option is that numbers are, in a very simple way, you have two objects, right? You have these two objects, you put them together. So there's two because they're two objects, so two pens or two. So the way we teach numbers to children, if we use that example and take, like there are no numbers out there, but based on the actual objects, they're nominal, therefore, they're nominal. Like based on the object, we say 1, 2. And beyond whatever is countable, there's nothing beyond that. So even p or pi, right? In the end, there's really the the circumference and the diameter is kind of like divided. I think it's divided. So you end up with pi. But you always have a circle in the first place. So it's not like some kind of abstract, but it's found on the basis of something. So it's nominal. And the third option is just made up. It's just created. The numbers don't exist. We just created them. Okay? Which one do you think it is? Are they Platonic, like they call it the Platonian idea numbers are somewhere in space? Are they nominal, or are they just created? Raise your hand for Platonic. Up in space somewhere, Platonic. One person. Okay, one person. Second person, nominal. Raise your hand. And just created. Wow. Just created. Created as in they don't exist. Created. Actually, they don't exist. Okay.
It's a human phenomenon.
Pardon?
Made up, right?
Yeah, but here I said created, they don't exist. They're just made up. They don't exist. Right? Are you still going with number 3? Okay. Interesting. From a Buddhist point of view, what is it? What is it from a Buddhist point of view? 1, 2, or 3? Okay, from a Buddhist point of view. Is it 1? Raise your hand. Platonian? No. Is it 2? It's number 2. From a Buddhist point of view, numbers are nominal. They exist. They're not just created in the sense that they don't exist, right? They are dependent on the human mind. That's true. But nevertheless, they exist. They're not non-existent. So from a Buddhist point of view, they're nominal. And the other two are two extremes. They don't exist at all. It's the extreme of nihilism. they exist outside of the things we count, that is the extreme of reification. Very interesting that you find that in the philosophy of math, right? But we haven't gotten to nominal yet, which is why it's not that obvious. From a Buddhist point of view, numbers exist because they're objects on the basis of which we say 1 and 2. That doesn't mean that 1 and 2 were to exist if there wasn't a mind. It's dependent on the mind, but nevertheless exist. So not just created out of thin air or in the sense created, anything is possible and they don't actually exist. No. Imputed. Yeah, and numbers are very helpful to understand things. Numbers are very helpful. One of my favorite number since I met Buddhism, what do you think is my favorite number since I met Buddhism? 0. Yes, oh, was that easy? Shunya. Emptiness means śūnyatā. 0 means shunya, right? Was actually discovered, or should I say imputed, labeled by an Indian mathematician. What's his name? Aryabhat? Okay, Aryabhat. All right, yeah, I remember looking it up, but I forgot the name. So I'm laughing about myself because I'm so bad with certain names. But the point is, 0 doesn't mean nothingness. In fact, because there's 0, everything is possible. Have you ever thought about it? Because there's 0, you have 10 and 20. If it wasn't for 0, nothing would be possible. Does that make sense? Yeah. So emptiness is just like that. 0, of course, is the negation of a value, either going from plus onwards or from minus onwards, right? One of the two, because in both directions. But if it wasn't for 0, you couldn't have anything else. And that is the same for emptiness. So it doesn't mean nothingness. It's still the negation. It's just the negation of something, but that makes everything possible. If it wasn't for shunya, numbers couldn't exist. If it wasn't for śūnyatā, phenomena couldn't exist. Isn't that beautiful, that similarity here?
So nominal is the same as imputed?
Nominal, yes.
Nominal means is imputed.
Yes. But let's look at it again. I mean, nominal the way I understand it. So in this particular video, I think the person is also opting for nominal. But I don't know whether it's for Buddhist reasons. He doesn't talk like a Buddhist in any way, but it just happens that that's his view, and there may be other views as well. So I'm not saying, yes?
There's this emerging field called embodied mathematics.
Embodied mathematics. Embodied as in like you have something that can be counted, or?
Yeah, so it also comes from this idea of the embodied mind, that the mind is embodied, and this is something that is kind of being developed and studied in the last 2-3 decades.
Oh, interesting. I need to research that. That's interesting. I've never heard embodied mind. Yeah.
The idea of numbers,
Yeah.
they say that 2 exists because there's 2 of a kind.
Yeah, exactly.
And the kind is a conceptual category that is created by the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Created by the mind. In Buddhism, you don't use the word created so much because that seems to suggest it doesn't exist. The mind just made it up. You use words such as labeled or designated by the mind. So there may be that difference. Like when I said they're just created, they don't exist, then they do exist from a Buddhist point of view, but not independent of the mind. So there's a fine difference. But that's interesting, embodied mathematics. Oh, I want to look that up. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, great. Going back to the seed and sprout thing, why is it so difficult? And I already put it in here. Why is it so difficult to define a sprout in such a way that it is clear, especially on a subtler level, whether a phenomenon is no longer a seed but a sprout, is that it becomes so subtle. And because the seed and the sprout are merely designated. Right? They're really designated. I mean, like, for instance, at lunchtime today, we had an interesting situation in that someone gave us a bowl of something she called Greek curd. Greek curd, she called it Greek curd. But then as we sat there, the other German nun and I, we recognized it as some kind of cheese we eat back home. But there's not even a German word for it, an English word for it. It's sometimes translated as cottage cheese, but actually cottage cheese is the next step. When you produce cottage cheese, you produce that. But usually no one eats it except maybe in Germany or maybe in some German-speaking countries, I'm not sure. So there's no word in the other languages, they just call it curd, all the way to the point when it's then called cheese. But since it tastes different to curd, so those people who don't eat it, to them it's good old curd. So sometimes maybe if they make curd and it turns out like that, they just said strange tasting. They call it a strange tasting curd, maybe at the very most. But the nun, the Korean nun who gave it to us, called it curd, Greek curd. Greek curd is quite different. It's very creamy. This wasn't creamy. It was more solid, right? But anyway, because the German nun, she knows how to make cottage cheese, she explained. So that is why Germans like it so much. It's actually purposely made, not as a step to making cottage cheese, but they stop the production there, pack it, and sell it. And we eat it in all sorts of varieties. So we need a name for it that's different. So for us, it's quark. It's called quark. It sounds a bit like the quarks of a subatomic particles. It's actually, I think it's maybe spelled the same way. Q-U-A-R-K. Yeah. So we say quark. Quark. It doesn't mean something very sophisticated. It's something we eat all the time. Quark. Anyway, the point is, you see, we label that. It's a whole industry in Germany based on that thing that other cultures don't give a name because they don't eat it that way. Right? So it's merely labeled. It exists as such. It does exist. But when does the curd become quark? None of you care because it's all curd. But for us, we give it a different name. So for us, it's like, oh, is this still curd? Because I don't want curd. Oh, now it's quark. For us, it's important. But the exact moment when it turns into quark, well, because it's merely labeled, there's a lot of disagreement. So going back to the seed and the sprout, if in some culture a seed and the sprout had the same name, I couldn't even ask you when does it become a seed or a sprout, because it's the whole time let's say it's seed. But since we label, we distinguish between these moments when it's a seed or a sprout, at some point we call it a seed or a sprout. But the problem is, since it's not from the side of the object, neither a seed nor a sprout, it's a matter of opinion. And when I ask you to walk past these 50,000 photographs, right? If I show you picture number 1 and picture number 49,999, you can say seed, sprout. It's very clear. Right? The first picture in that line, it's a seed. The last picture is a sprout. No problem. But when you get to the time when the transformation takes place, it's a matter of opinion because there's nothing from the side of the object. Right? It's all coming, it's all the thought, it is the seed, it is the sprout. Is the seed saying from its own side, hello, I'm a seed, by the way, call me that because that's what I am? No, it's neither a seed nor a sprout, nor anything else. Even matter. Or is it cold or warm? Is it smooth or not? From its own side, it's not smooth. It's like if you touch it and it feels smooth, we can say it's smooth. The smoothness doesn't exist just in and of itself. So it's always in relation to something other than itself, and then labeling it, that's when it exists. Right? But then that's how it exists, and not anywhere, it cannot exist as anything more than just that. Because otherwise there would be a correct answer. Is it a sprout or is it a seed? And that doesn't make any sense. what is the exact seed, what is the sprout. Does that make sense? Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense that samosa is not a name for a girl. Or that you cannot, I mean, maybe in some cultures, there exists the word samosa, and that's a girl's name, or a boy's name, or a dog's name, or whatever else. Yeah? If it was inherently that particular dish, it wouldn't happen, because you would see it as samosa. Everyone would perceive it as samosa. In fact, you didn't have to learn a language. You would already know it's samosa. Or no, you would have to learn a language, but then the problem is it could only be one language. You would still learn a language, but you could only use one language. It would not be okay to call it samosa in one language, and in German make Teig, we would call it probably a Teigtasche. Because from its own side, it is a samosa. And not, you see what I'm saying? So things become impossible. But let's see. That's definitely not how it seems to us. That doesn't seem to be enough. That doesn't seem to be enough for it to exist. But that's only the last type of dependence, and I just couldn't hold back. Couldn't wait to tell you. I mean, many of you already know, but we'll go more into details. So therefore, think, when is it a seed? When is it a sprout? First of all, every moment can be endlessly subdivided, so to find the exact moment becomes difficult. But also, from its own side, it's neither a seed nor a sprout. We call it that. And thus, it's a matter of convention or of opinion in that case even, because we'll probably all disagree. On the object, like the first moment of the first photograph and the last photograph, we will all agree. But when it's in between, you know, it's like that process of when it slowly changes, then it becomes a matter of opinion. Okay. But if the sprout existed inherently, objectively, and by way of its own character, in and of itself, the way it appears to us to exist, there would be a smallest moment in time, and we would be able to pinpoint the exact first moment. If it existed that way, it would be from the side of the object, nothing to do with our mind, and there would be a correct answer. Does that make sense? Very important. All right, so that's dependence on causes and conditions, right? So what did you learn so far? Number one, things seem to be so solidly this, that, and the other. But they only become like that due to causes and conditions. So this becomes most obvious how helpful that is in terms of understanding that there is no inherent existence when we find ourselves to have very strong, powerful, afflictive emotions such as hatred, for instance, anger, resentment, even attachment. Because it seems the object is this from its own side. It has nothing to do with anything else, and so either we want it, in the case of attachment, or we want to be separated from it and we want to harm it. But if we understand it's just the result of many, many, many causes and conditions, then in that sense it's naturally, in and of itself, this thing, good or bad, what have you, that sense starts to disappear. And then it's very difficult to be hateful and so forth. Instead, we could even be compassionate in the case of love and compassion, or in the case of attachment. We can let go of that attachment. We don't necessarily need to own it. This person we find so amazing, well, they're just the result of causes and conditions, and sometimes they're changing all the time, and when those causes and conditions change, the person changes. So no surprise, they're not always going to be like that. So what are we attached to? It's like holding on to quicksand. Does everyone know what quicksand is, right? It's like you can't build something on quicksand. So everything is like quicksand. It's constantly changing, constantly changing, constantly changing. But we have the sense it's there. It's not changing. There's something solid I'm trying to hold on, but impossible to hold on to. You can't hold on to quicksand. We build this whole reality on quicksand, and of course they're just castles, that they're imaginations. A lot of it is just imagined by the mind. Unrealistic expectations, in other words, that sooner or later they'll collapse. I love you forever. It feels that way in that moment, right? But unless we, I mean, there's, the thing is, there's no forever. Either there's divorce or death, right? Divorce or death. It's one of the two. Forever? No way. Tyler?
Say, like, the Buddhists must have just been smiling so big as, like, the discipline of atomic physics evolved, right? And we understood all the particles are moving. I mean, it just so perfectly aligns with dependent rising and everything changing. Just our understanding of atomic physics.
Oh.
It's just, like, perfect, like,
Right.
Buddhists must have been like, oh, see? The whole time, this is it. Everything's changing every second. Dependent rising, it perfectly aligns.
Yeah, you're right, you're right. I mean, you know what the meaning of atom is actually? You know what's the meaning of atom? Partless. Having no parts. That's ridiculous. There's nothing that it doesn't exist of something other than itself. But yeah, the idea of atoms was like, yeah, smallest building blocks that you can't even, not even conceptually can you divide them further, just that. And then they would be permanent. They would have to be permanent. If they were partless, they would have to be permanent. So partless, static things that make up the whole world. And then over the years, yeah, so Buddhist and science didn't have that much contact, unfortunately, but just in the last few years, it's oftentimes that, you know, there's a new discovery and you go, oh, told you so. The Buddha said it's 2,600 years ago, now you believe it, right? Yeah, it's that. But that's why it's such an interesting time when science is actually going beyond the traditional that it was stuck in for so long because it didn't have the devices, the gadgets, the possibilities. Now there are a lot more possibility with the internet, of course, but also the gadgets they have available, and they can make different tests, right?
His Holiness leading the way.
And His Holiness leading the way, that is, yeah, amazingly he did. Yes, definitely for the Tibetans. I mean, unfortunately, I would love that a lot of scientists know His Holiness in the West, but they don't, usually. I mean, His Holiness is, unfortunately, everyone knows the word Dalai Lama, but yeah, it would be nice if more scientists knew about it and were a little bit more open, but that's unfortunately in the West not the case. I don't think that many people know about or would even sit down. You see, the problem is that Buddhism is still called a religion, right? There are a lot of scientists very open to His Holiness, and His Holiness had that exchange, of course. But I also met people who were scientists, and I said, you know, the Dalai Lama, and he's like, what are you talking, the Dalai Lama, he's a Tibetan, he's a Buddhist, right? They know that, but it's got nothing to do with Buddhism. They're not even really aware of it, which for His Holiness is also not important. He took that step, he introduced Tibetans to Buddhism, to science, so now they're learning both, and now there are all these Tibetans to pass on the message, of course. And it has already been passed on. His Holiness was the first to take that step, absolutely. One of the first. I can't say that there was no one else, but one of the first definitely to take that step. Incredible. And the foresight. He started this like 30, 40 years ago when this wasn't even anything that people thought was possible. They still ran parallel as totally separate. But His Holiness knew already the time has come. And now it's more and more and more. Incredible. More and more and more. But Buddhism is not a religion as such. It seems there's these similarities, of course, and there are aspects you could call religious. And it's culturally religious. I mean, but actual Buddhism, it's not about worship. What is devotion? Like devotion and worship we associate with the religion, right? But actually, it's just good for the mind. That's why we do it. It's not good for the Buddha. It's not, the Buddha doesn't need worship. The Buddha doesn't need devotion. The Buddha is already a Buddha, so the Buddha doesn't worship. The Buddha doesn't practice devotion, has already achieved what can be achieved, so, and also doesn't need to be worshipped. But it's good for the mind. Psychologically, it's just good for the mind. It opens us to something greater than ourselves. Simple as that. So psychologically, it's good for us, and that's why we should do it.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like, if you think about the scientific method, you think about that as more part of like recent history, but like everything the Buddha says, test it for yourself. You get the same results. Like, he's
Yeah.
the OG evangelist of the scientific method for the personal self
Yeah.
and consciousness in the mind. And I just find that, I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, how beautiful. I was like, the Buddha was talking about the scientific method 2,500 years ago, and now that's really the religion modern scientists live by. Is
Right.
it testable? Is it repeatable?
Yeah.
Darn it is.
Yeah.
Try it out for yourself.
Exactly. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. It's just fascinating that you already knew that in advance. That's really fascinating. But of course, what is so incredible now that Buddhism and science, they complement each other. I mean, there's a lot of things in modern psychology and modern science that is not part of Buddhism. So you can add it to Buddhism, right? You can add it. Many of the methods that they develop, they're very much developed for the Western mind. And then bring in mindfulness, bring in the importance of love and compassion. And in the end, call it whatever you want to call it. Buddhism or something, or Buddhology, Buddhology or something. Whatever you want to call it, the name is not important. But use it. I mean, the only reason why anyone is interested, the Buddha, those scientists who have a Buddhist background, they want to, and even scientists without it, they want to benefit others. So that's the only purpose, nothing else. Not join the club. We need more numbers. No. In fact, like what I told you, His discourages anyone from becoming a Buddhist because it's very strongly linked to our identity. And if your identity is linked to another religion, you may face conflict. Our culture, the culture in Germany is Christian. So I come from a Christian family that never practiced Christianity and still is very much part of our culture. And the same is true in Israel. Judaism it's so strongly a culture, right? I mean, the religious part is practiced by some very intensely, of course, then they're called Orthodox Jews, by some little bit, then they're liberal, and some by none of them. And still, Judaism is very much part of the culture. And in Hinduism, in India, it's the same, especially since it's such a large country and there's so many different forms of Hinduism. It's every form is different, right? Different gods being more important, different practices being more important. And so there's no need to give it up, to bring that in. So if you're a Jew, be a better Jew. If you're Hindu, be a better Hindu. Be Christian, be a better Christian. If you're atheist, be a better atheist. If you're agnostic, be a better agnostic. So, right? Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah, exactly. But the good thing is, the times when Buddha said so and people take it on and are open to it, they're over. They're over. I mean, there are still some countries, the Buddha said so and they believe it, but there are oftentimes those that just follow it as a cultural thing. Go to the temple once a month or once a week, pray for more money, better job, health of my children, done. But that's not the actual Buddhism. It's all about practicing it, right? That's so important. So the Buddha saying it's so, for those who really want to practice it, that's not enough. Now scientists saying it becomes more convincing, right? Because scientists are the new priests, the new lamas, honestly, like blind faith, did we overcome blind faith? No. A guy with a fancy PhD from Harvard, everyone believes it, right? You read it, you Google it, ooh, this guy, he's got this degree and that degree, he must be right. Blind faith. So the Buddha said, don't have blind faith. Likewise, we still have that tendency to have blind faith. We carry it over to the scientists now, right? Like my stepmom, she totally believes science, but she doesn't even know science. So oftentimes we've had like discussions, and then I realized, she doesn't really know. So for me, the best is to just look it up, Google it, and say, look. And then she goes, ooh. And then if there are similarities between Buddhism and stuff, and then she's like, she doesn't say anything. Right? Because She has these ideas and she holds on to it, but she hasn't checked really. I mean, I would have forgotten if I read that like a month ago, I would have forgotten. So I look it up freshly and can say, look, it's like that. And anyway, science has they come to new discoveries all the time. Anyway, okay, so therefore, science at this point is so precious to have both. All right. Do you need science to become enlightened? No. But it makes it easier. Makes it easier. Okay, great. Now that is dependence on causes and conditions. Then there is a slightly subtler oh, yes, Shubha.
We are taking a lot of examples of anger.
Anger, yeah.
And how it's easy, like how the anger and hatred reduces when we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But can we also focus on attachment?
Yeah, you're right.
Because it's more difficult because when you understand why you're attached to it, let's say a person who the hair is so pretty, the infatuation of the attachment increases. So
Yeah.
that becomes more difficult. So
Yeah, you're right.
for me.
Because it's more difficult, I don't mention it as much. It's much more striking to use anger. But you're right, attachment, you know the analogy they give how attachment is? They give an analogy. Attachment, trying to remove attachment from the mind is like trying to remove oil from a piece of paper. We all know how difficult that is, right? Or oil from a piece of cloth. Anger is like, you know, like a little bit of dry dust on a piece of, that's much easier. It's much easier. Which is why it's also it's easier to use it as an example. We can let go of anger easier than we can let go of attachment. And that is therefore more obvious when I use anger. Like, for instance, with this woman that we hated because she was a serial killer. I'm still going back to her because all the other ones can be applied to her as well, the other types of dependent arising. But yeah, talking about attachment, you're right. For instance, in terms of the dependence on causes and conditions. The thing is, would I be less attached to my computer, for instance, or to a person if I knew there were causes and conditions that give rise to them? That's a little harder. In a way, well, especially when it comes to another person. I think they're so wonderful. It's within the person, there's something wonderful. But first of all, it was created by other causes and conditions. So it's not within them as such. It's there right now as a result of causes and conditions, but it's also changing all the time. Because the moment these causes and conditions change, then the way they affect this person, the person's going to change. They won't always be like that. While our attachment suggests it's always going to be like that. I want to be with them forever. Sound familiar? Right? But they change, we change, everything changes. What about forever? Yeah? So if you think about that, I did mention it briefly, but not as much as anger. So yes, the causes and conditions, because they change, how people are affected by these causes and conditions, we change. I mean, how many people are in love now, and 10 years later, they're up in arms? You know, these nasty divorces. I mean, they're the worst enemies. How can that happen? If you think about it. How can you go from loving someone to hating them more than anyone else? Well, it happens because they're not inherently this, that, and the other. If they were inherently wonderful, you know, with attachment, think, anyone you have attachment there. First of all, there's attachment because of the mental the mental qualities and because of the physical qualities. The physical is easy, relatively. Visualize the person with the first layer of skin removed. Something as thin as skin, right? You look at this person, wow, they're so beautiful, they're smooth skin. All right, let's keep the skin on, just remove it in the face. See what happens to your attachment. Or just remove it around the eyes or the mouth, right? Or have a bit of an insight of the texture, the smell, when you open their colon. Take a whiff. right? They smell so good because they use Duff or Lux or what have you, right? Every day, because if they didn't, well, you know, lock them into a cave for a month and take a sniff. Sorry, that sounds really horrible. But, you know, or allow them to just be in a cave for a month without any water and take a sniff. If they were really inherently good smelling, you wouldn't need that soap, that stuff. You can just, you know, leave them without taking a shower. Take a, what do you call it? Like a, what do you call that? Like take a swiff? No, that's not the right way. What is it? Whiff, that's right, yeah. Did I say whiff? Anyway, take a whiff, you know, and then see how you feel. So, beauty, it's just a creation of the mind. Beauty usually comes with a sense of purity. Oh, this person is so beautiful, so the external. Vision, I mean, the thing is, what's really amazing is that I realize people grow old. It's really funny. When I was young, intellectually I thought, yeah, people grow old, but I didn't really believe it. There were people who were always old, the ones that since I was little I saw them as old. So they were usually the ones older than me. I remember the first place after high school that I went to was Israel. Actually, it just happened by it was coincidence that I went there, and I went to a kibbutz. And I was 18, and there was a girl there. She was so old. I thought, oh my God, she's so old. She really doesn't understand anything. She's 24. How does she know? I remember thinking, she's so old. I really felt she was super old. And it had nothing to do with her external appearance, because she didn't look older than any of us. But she was so old. It was incredible. And then anyone like beyond 30 was like, oh, grandparents. 50 was like unimaginable, and 70 was almost dead. It was really like, my view of age was so weird. And it was like, this is not going to happen to me. And the worst was when I turned 30. Oh my God, I'm no longer 20. How did this happen? And then onwards, I no longer cared. Any other, 40 was nothing. I didn't care. And anything else, right? It was not a problem. But from 20 to 30, that's when I realized I'm no longer a young woman. I'm called middle-aged now soon. Now I'm old. But I was middle-aged then. I was no longer young. I was happy when I was no longer a teenager. I was so happy when I turned 20. So that was different, because I couldn't wait to reach the legal age. I could vote now. The only time I ever voted was last year. During COVID also. Because I left Germany, where was I going to vote from? It was impossible. And I wasn't informed enough about politics, but I couldn't wait until I could vote. But I was already somewhere else. I never voted until COVID. I was there, so I voted for the first time. I didn't even know how it works. I had to Google how you vote, right? So, but 30, now it's over. When did this happen? That was far too fast, it was so weird. And I had to realize that people grow old. So now, just the other day, actually today, my sister sent me a photograph of a guy I was infatuated with when I was 14. When you were taking treatment, she sent me the picture. And I thought this guy was so cute. He was so super cool. And he's still okay. But it's like, he's so old. He was so good looking, so cute, and now he's so old. His hair and everything is totally gray, and it's like, it's bizarre. Yes, Nitzan, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, because attachment feels to me connected to craving. Craving is something I feel very inside of me.
Okay.
So it feels, I'm creating it, like it feels it's dependent on my mind.
Yes.
But aversion, it's not like coming from, it doesn't feel like it's coming from the craving. It feels more outside from me. So
interesting.
Like,
Interesting. All right, okay. Craving for what, for instance?
for food.
Oh, food. Which food? Tell me food. Tell me which food. Hummus?
Tofu, I like tofu.
Chocolate?
Tofu.
Huh?
Tofu.
Tofu. Oh, tofu? Tofu without anything? Oh, that's it. Okay. All right, tofu. I like tofu, but of course not just like. So, okay, if it was not from the side of the object, allow me, now visualize a wonderful plate of tofu, okay? Okay, and now think, I spit inside your bowl. If it's not from the side of the object, right? Or anything disgusting. I mean, because it seems like it doesn't have to do with this from the side of the object, or you knew it actually contains some bacteria that we never knew about. That tofu, suddenly we find out, oh gosh, no one ever knew. Whatever tofu, whatever you use, it has something that changes your DNA. Check it, so it's not me spitting because it's not part of the tofu, fortunately. Sorry for that image. But no, think that if they find out there's something that changes your DNA in tofu, would you still crave it the same way? And so does that come from your mind or does it come from the tofu? Right? It comes from the tofu. It comes from the tofu. If you crave a person, for instance, well, if suddenly this person, like physically, I'm talking physically, mental is different. Usually,
sometimes you can really feel it come, like the hunger. Like,
yeah.
you can really feel like the hunger coming, becoming so strong, and then like going down. So it really feels like attachment is connecting with energy.
All right, okay, that is the problem with physical craving, because that is hunger and thirst. And that we need to survive, so it gets mixed. Of course, like let's say you've just eaten 5 kilo of tofu, and I put in front of you a plate of tofu. It's not going to do anything. You feel you want to throw up. I don't even need to put the bacteria or whatever in there. I don't need to spit on it. All I need to do is force you to eat 5 kilo of tofu. And
I know I'm full, so like I'm trying to debate you because
you know you're full. You don't need to know it. You don't need, even if you didn't know it, you would feel full. You see, it's because it's a mixture. There's the craving for food that is enhanced by hunger. That's the problem. It's the hunger that now mixes. So there is a physical reaction. There's a physical reaction that is now mixed with the attachment. Does that make sense? But actually, we don't really ever experience hunger. We never experience hunger, so we're missing out on something. In the sense that if you're really, really hungry, what is your least favorite food? Dry bread? Dry, stale bread? Meat, okay, let's say meat. You're so hungry, you're so super hungry, you haven't eaten for days, and all you get to eat is meat. What is going to happen? It's delicious. And His Holiness was once asked, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, what is your favorite food? And he said, the food I eat when I'm most hungry. Right? Because it tastes, so you see that's a physical reaction. Now you do have preferences, but if you were really super, super hungry, I guess it doesn't matter what you eat. You no longer, we have the luxury of not being super hungry, and then we of course pick and choose. But even that can change. All you need is, remember when I don't know whether you were here, when I talked about my favorite food were pears, and then I ate something and it changed around. So here it really came from my body, and in this case it's a physical reaction. But it's not just, that's because the body needs to eat. If we never felt hungry, if we felt always full, let's say we lived in a world where you had no hunger, no thirst, you were always full, you were always satisfied, we probably wouldn't eat, and we wouldn't have craving for foods. Maybe we would crave the smell, maybe the sight of it, but not the taste. We wouldn't want to eat anything. Is that right? Does that make sense? So this is a little bit more complicated if you're talking about food. But craving for things that are not necessary for your survival, that's different. Yeah, so craving for people, take off one layer of skin. Visualize that. for external. Okay, you're at an age where that is, I mean, let's face it, you're young, hormones are strong. I mean, I know, of course. So the older you get, the less that becomes a problem, but it's still there. I became a young nun very, very young, and these hormones were an issue. Honestly, I was whoa. And then it changed when I turned 30. It was no longer the physical appearance of the opposite sex. It was babies. Babies in buckets. I keep saying that jokingly, but when I first came here, Tibetans didn't have proper baths for their babies. They didn't have baby bath. And they often didn't have bathrooms. So they took a bucket with warm water, stuck the baby in the bath, and at the side of the road, they would wash their babies. And I, in my 30s, would go like, baby, I want to hug it. Babies in buckets, that was my obsession. There were always babies everywhere, and I wanted to just cuddle them. They were so cute. That was the hormone, when you usually have children. I mean, you shouldn't wait too long, so, 20, 30, different hormones. That was physical. So the physical also comes in. Yeah? But it's both. It's both. And you can learn to control the physical. You can totally learn to control it, right? But that takes time. And it's very strong. So it becomes mixed with that, yes. So a lot of the attachment, like attachment towards another person, that is not just attachment to a friend, but on a relationship, how can you, I don't want to use the word, that is more than just a friendship.
Non-platonic.
Pardon?
Non-platonic.
Yeah, non-platonic. That is non-platonic. So that kind of, there's a lot of hormones being at play. And that's when it really seems, and it's true, there's something from the side of the mind, but there's also something from the side of the object. Because if you're 20 and there's someone who's 80, that's not an issue. It's not a problem, right?
So I asked this question at Tashika too, and I didn't necessarily love the answer. But does the Dharma talk about chemical reactions at all? We're talking about hormones, right? Like dopamine, oxytocin, pheromones.
Oh.
Where that feels like that's not necessarily in the mind; it's the body where it's like, wow.
Yes.
Is that still considered?
Yes. They don't talk about pheromones and dopamine and all that. They don't have these names.
Yeah.
But it makes
That
perfect
seems more real than just
Yeah.
oh, it's in my head,
Yeah.
and if I just spend more time with this person, I get
Yep.
sick of them eventually, or do
Yeah.
that. It's feels
It's true.
really real and
Yeah.
powerful.
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, hunger. You don't need to go as far as these hormones. I mean, you could just use hunger and thirst. But yes, of course, there are things that are very difficult. There's very little power because of these the hormones, right? Dopamine is a hormone, isn't it?
Neurotransmitter.
A neurotransmitter.
Between the synapses.
That's right, but is it not also a hormone? I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. But anyway, these particular chemicals, these neurotransmitters that create happiness. And yeah, exactly. There's more than that. There are also physical objects, and we are dependent on them. But the mind, of course, reacts to it as well. The mind, if you have a lot of control, dopamine or no dopamine, you can control it. You can learn to control it. It always depends on the person, right? I mean, even with food, people have so much self-control that their favorite meal is in front of them, and even they're totally hungry and everything, they can control it, right? So realize it's just a physical reaction. It's nothing, it doesn't exist in and of itself. So let's just, not focus too much on it. They don't focus on it so much. Like usually when they arise, we focus on it. Yeah? You don't need to go as far as that. In my room, there's some chocolate. And that chocolate keeps calling me. I have a sweet tooth. A sweet tooth, and I want to control it. I know sugar, why should I eat it for? I don't need to eat it. And I'm really controlling it. And if it's not around, no problem. But it's lying around in my room. I managed to give it to you. Last night I almost ate it. I held it in my hand. I had already in my hand the Twix, 2 Twix. So I was like, okay. And you see, what happened was I imagined the taste. That's exactly what it was. I imagined the taste. So by imagining what it tastes, craving started. And then my mom called. I put the Twix to the side because I wasn't going to eat and munch away and not enjoy, because, you know, I want to enjoy without anyone talking to me. I put it aside and she talked for quite a while. And then it was over. I was done. It was no longer there. So the Twix is still lying there. So I'm wondering, should I just keep it there and continue practicing? The thing is, I was focused. I imagined it. That's why when we think about certain food, what happens? Water collects in our mouth, right? Why? Because we imagine it, and our brain does what it does if the food is in front of us. The food is not in front of us, we just imagine it. If I were to talk about juicy, tasty, samosa, or pakora, dripping, right? You can imagine it right in front of you, and you can almost taste it. Sometimes, right? Yeah, because we visualize it. That's the problem. If I choose not to think about it, it's not an issue, right? So there's hunger and so forth. I'm not going to think about it. And funny enough, it goes away. I feel really hungry. I mean, I'm not suffering from real hunger. But, you know, I haven't eaten for the last 2 hours, so I feel like I'm hungry. Yeah? But then I think of something else and it disappears. So with the dopamine as well, like with these, you know, there's this feeling, I'm obsessing over it, I'm thinking of it. I imagine I'm getting the thing that gives me even more of it. Being with this person, for instance, you know, it's their smell. Apparently there's a lot of smell involved as well. Pheromones, yeah. I saw this disgusting experiment where, you know, 5 women, they sniffed on the basketball dress of 5 men that had been just sweating for, right? And they had to decide which smell they liked most. So is A better, B better? And they put them back into the plastic bags, and they didn't know who these 5 guys were. And then they were shown pictures of these 5 guys, or they saw them in actuality, and it matched the smells and who they preferred. So they thought it was the external, but it was actually the smell and the external. And we have a saying in German, instead of saying, I can't stand them, we say, I can't smell them. We actually say, I can't stand that person. We say, I can't smell that person. That's a saying in German. And I never knew why we say that. And I guess someone picked up on that and transformed that in, like, you can't bear their smell. Yeah? And sometimes it's a smell that is not unpleasant. Of course, if they have an unpleasant smell, but we're not even aware. We couldn't really tell it's bad or good, or it's just a smell. And still, our chemicals react to that person's chemical. Yet, nevertheless, although we are very much influenced by that, you learn how to go beyond that. You learn to control your mind. So I tell you one thing. When I was younger, when I first met Buddhism, but even before that, the weather very much influenced me when it came to whether I was happy or not. The weather, you know, the sun was shining, there was a cool wind, I was happy. There was like this humidity, it was foggy and raining the whole time and dark, I was in a bad mood. Now, I don't care. Now, I don't care what the weather is. It rains, I'm happy. It doesn't rain, I'm happy. The sun shines. I like rain, but I'm not unhappy when the sun shines, right? So it really, there's some change. There's some change. So the external doesn't have the same influence on my mind. And I'm not saying I'm a good practitioner. I'm not at all. I'm the worst. But I am changing because of everything I've learned. Sooner or later, you will change. So I don't care the food I get. And there are certain foods I like, but I'm also interested in new foods or new people. It doesn't really, there's not like the external is no longer as important. And that's freedom. Because I can't control the weather, and I can't always control what I eat. So I'm a lot more independent in a sense, in a good way, right? I have more freedom. And so these chemicals, also, of course, there's still hormones and everything is still there, but it doesn't affect me. Maybe for a second, and then I go, and I just do my own thing. Yes, Tyler?
I was gonna say, like, yeah, like, I think all of that just crystallizes the necessity or at least helpfulness of celibacy. And it's like, someone like me, I've definitely taken refuge in like intimacy and sex and just human connection in the past. And then when that leaves, I was a wreck, you know, for like almost a year. It's like, this is why
I was like that. I was a teenager once. What do you think, you know? I mean, I had crushes, you know. I was like, yeah, I liked certain guys, and then, you know, I had a boyfriend and all. Yeah, but now it's like, ugh, you know, it's like, oh my God, no, I wouldn't want that. Yeah, but the thing is, like, it's a physical reaction, but you learn to no longer be driven by that, because there's something that's more fun. If I wasn't a nun, I would do it. There's nothing wrong with having a partner, and there's nothing wrong with, in fact, it can be incredible practice. I would do it. There's nothing wrong with it. However, in my case, yeah, I've chose this kind of life, but you can really control it. You can learn to control it. Everyone can, even when they're in a relationship. I know that some Indian couples, for instance, they observe certain holidays. So when they're celibate, right? Aren't there times when they're celibate as well? In Judaism, I know there are. In traditional Judaism, there are only certain times when the husband and wife have intercourse. So maybe, isn't that in some observant families, right?
So there is a temple called Sabrimala.
Uh-huh.
Not to go to the temple means do 45 days practice
Celibacy. There you go.
In Judaism, it's every month.
Pardon?
Every month.
In Judaism, only when you're fertile, right? When you're, yeah, after you menstruated, then you have, yeah, in Judaism.
You cannot sleep next to each other every month.
Right, yes. So only when you can actually conceive. So this is interesting, and I said before, you may have a lot of attachment. You see other women, they're fair ones, they're, you know, whatever, or a lot of other men, and still when you're in a relationship and you're committed to that person, you're not going to be unfaithful, right? Even then, because now your mind feels, I don't want to put that, I don't want to risk this relationship. I don't want, in the long term, it's going to harm me. We can do it all the time. Or we don't eat certain foods. You've got diabetes. Well, the chocolate is calling you, as it did yesterday. Though I don't have diabetes, but still, I want to reduce sugar. So it's calling you, but you can resist it. It's all about control. That makes us superior to animals, right? We want to go beyond that instinct, yeah? Because the more we do, the happier we get. There's more freedom. Ronnie.
It's like method to, I don't know, stop addictions to cigarettes, alcohol.
Yeah, very good. I'm glad you bring it up. These addictions. We have so many addictions. We are all addicts. Really, we are addicts. We're food addicts. We're entertainment addicts, right? So these are fortunately not like heroin and meth and all these terrible drugs. But some food drugs can be, you know. You have your bag of chips every day. No, not a good idea. Yeah, too much salt, too much oil. Yeah, very good point you make. Addiction. We're all addicts. In comparison to a Buddha or a liberated being, we're all addicts. I used to, for a while, be with a group because one of my step-aunt, she's an alcoholic, and she's really incredible. She talks about it with anyone. She keeps no secret. And that's wonderful because I learned a lot about alcoholism. Like she was, in her marriage, she had to live with her father and mother-in-law, and they always criticized her and they put a lot of pressure on her. And that was so difficult for her. She started drinking until it was getting too bad. And she then joined a group that uses mindfulness. And they asked me a few times to come and talk to them. And at that time, when I listened to them, I thought, oh my God, I'm also an addict. I'm not an addict. I mean, I'm not addicted to alcohol, but I'm addicted to ice cream. I can eat a liter of ice cream and still feel like I can eat more. I stopped eating ice cream now, many years ago. But when I was younger, I was addicted to ice cream. I was addicted to anything. Ice cream was the worst. It could be as sweet as it gets. I would always like it. And trust me, there's some butterscotch ice cream in the cloud couch. I could eat that. And I did give in a few times. So the point is, I feel like I'm an addict. I'm addicted, I'm addicted to so many things. Addicted to entertainment, addicted to food. We all are. And it's attachment. And it's physical as well, and both mental as well. But you can control. It is mind over body. If we can learn to control our mind, then we gain control over our body. That's so important. That's what I tried to stress yesterday when I talked about Alzheimer, for instance, when I talked about these nuns. That's why we're talking about this. Don't allow your body to control you. Learn to control your mind, and when you control your mind, you control the world. Your world. Your reality. Does that make sense? Okay, Shumam, you're the last one, and then I'll continue. Sorry, I meant to really finish. Go ahead.
The second part, which you said. So one, you mentioned about physical qualities, how you can reduce, but mental qualities.
Mental qualities, what?
How would you let go of that attachment when you're attracted to
Of mental qualities. Oh, because they're changing, and these mental qualities, even if you have, then generate the same mental quality. Why do you need to be with that person for that quality? You see, that's the thing. Why do you want to be with someone that have a certain mental quality? Why do we want to own it? Just enjoy it when it's there and work on the quality yourself. Right? If it's kindness, if you see this kindness and you want to, well, generate kindness in yourself. Or recognize the kindness in everyone else. Like, what makes us feel good? Think, is it the physical or is it just the mental? If that person were an 80-year-old woman, right? And they had that kind quality. So let's face it, it is not just the mental. Because if the external wasn't there, this is so interesting when people are fooled online. When they fall in love with a beautiful girl online, right? She's beautiful. He's beautiful. He's a surfer with a perfect body, Greek god or whatever, right? Blonde, kind of longish hair, whatever it is. Or she, beautiful long hair, hourglass figure and all that. And then she's really kind and you love her. If you find out she's an overweight lady or, a 50-year-old drunk, what happens to your attachment? All these beautiful qualities that were expressed in these words. We don't even see the qualities. We hear these words and assume them because the qualities we don't perceive. And if the external is not there, gone. Gone in 1 second. So imagine you're chatting with this, I love the internet for that. That you can actually imagine you're in love with this person. You're in love with this person who you've never met. So you think they have this beautiful, perfect body. And on top of that, they say the kindest things. So just saying the kindest thing doesn't mean they're kind. They could be pretending. There are a lot of actors and actresses who are very good at pretending they're kind. I'm not saying, Julia Roberts, she can play a devil and she can play a beautifully kind woman. So AI can do that. In fact, in Japan, people get married to AIs. Huh? They get married to AIs. You can actually marry. They don't want to have a relationship, all the mess, so they have a very reliable AI and they fall in love with that. So it's not even a mind. So which mental quality, please tell me? Right? Honestly, if you think about it, we have that, we really imagine there to be a person, these pure qualities. Let's say you're infatuated with this girl or whatever is your preference. So then you meet this person. And they end up being an 80-year-old, overweight, whatever. What happens? Gone or not? See, it was never the mental. See, it was never the mental. The mental is important if they were nasty and mean and would always scream at you. They can be as pretty as it gets. You wouldn't want anything. Okay, I get that. They could look like Barbie or whatever. But no, there's the mental as well. But a lot of it is just a creation, just because they talk nicely. So analyze again, just because they're nice, say a nice thing. It could be an AI, right? Maybe one day we'll have humans that look like humans and they're machines, really. And still they sound nicely and they're also incredible, but there's not even a mind. So no mental quality to be attached to. You see how much your mind needs to add? We can't see the mind of the other person. we assume they're not zombies, and so assume they have that kindness. Right? We let ourselves fool by appearances. Okay, we need to take a break. So sorry, I've been chit-chatting so much. But in a way, I need to put it into perspective. I don't want to bombard you with ideas and stuff that don't make sense. We're so being fooled. We fool ourselves. We allow ourselves to be fooled. We have to break through this. Okay? All right, anyway, let's take a break. Can we really do 20 minutes now? Okay, 10 to 20 to, or 15 minutes? No, 20 minutes. Okay, let's do 20 minutes. So 3:50. We'll get together again. Thank you. Discussion group around a little bit, and we can do that. Just have new people, I think it's a good idea to go halfway through and then just have new people, because you get new ideas. So yeah, let's change the discussion group. How that's going to happen, I guess, yeah, I don't know, maybe have a piece of paper with numbers written on them, A, B, A, B, A, B, and then pass them out without anyone seeing these pieces of paper. Just write A, B, A, B on each paper, pass it on, and then whoever's A goes there and who's B. And it'd be very unlikely to have exactly the same constellation, I guess. So I think that's a good idea for the discussion group. Maybe, would you mind to do that? Okay, great. All right, so discussion group will be there'll be a new constellation of the discussion group. Yeah, whatever, 1, 2, A, B, Nimadawa, whatever. Right, anything you can think of, like 2, piece of paper, fold the paper, anyone pulls, you can't even blame anyone else, you took the paper. No, I'm kidding. So then the A is one discussion group and B is the other. That would probably be the easiest. Does that sound okay? And if the discussion group happened to be exactly the same, do it over again. All right, and I was asked to stop the silence. Okay, from now on, silence is done, because people want to get to know each other. And that's true. We only have 3 more days to get to know each other. And you can hear us chatting away in the back. Sometimes I know. When I get something, I can hear everyone there, and I'm thinking, wow, that's loud. And sometimes your area is very quiet, and sometimes it's not. But, I like the silence in the sense that gives you the opportunity to let the material sink deeper. But I also want you to get to know each other better. Now, we've done a lot of silence. You've been pretty good. You've been pretty good with the silence. I am impressed. As we were chatting away and you were so silently sitting there getting your toast, I've noticed that. But now it's time to get to know each other, and hopefully you're more into the Dharma, which means hopefully the Dharma is still present. You can still reflect on it, and at the same time get to know each other. Does that sound fair? Yes.
I'd like to continue.
Please. Okay, by all means. She likes it. Very good. Those who want to continue with the silence, you can let everyone know, right, here in the class. Maybe when everyone is here, I say it once again. Yeah, so to... You don't need you need a sign. I mean, I remember. It's of course a little...
You can get them in the office if you want to.
Oh, okay, you can get them. Okay. The thing is, like, of course, it's a little difficult for you if people chat around you, but you could take your plate and maybe yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. If someone wants to do silence, you could either get a button or something in silence so people remember. That would probably also be a good idea, yeah. Yes, Simran? Yes, okay, so for those of you, okay. Pardon? Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, for those who would like to continue with the silence, great. Get one of those buttons. And then for the rest of you, how can they get the button?
You have to go to the office when it's open. So today, hopefully, Shashi should be there.
Okay, so today is already closed?
No, she's there.
She's there now.
She'll be there, I think, another.
If we know now, we can also remember if we know who all would like to.
Yeah, I remember Simran and Shabari, right? So those two, and also Ronnie.
I'll see. I'll get the badges.
Pardon?
I can get the badge.
Yeah.
And I can put it on.
So essentially 4. I mean, I can go get
4, okay, great. So let's get 4. Let's ask Tyler, because he's not here right now. And Gal, I don't know. Do you think she's not here? Pardon? Pardon?
She's a volunteer.
Ah, so she's talking anyway. Okay. Okay, Tyler. I just said like we will restructure the discussion group. There'll be new groups. And secondly, we'll stop with the silence for those who want to. But there's still some who want to remain silent. They're going to get stickers now, so everyone knows. But for the rest, you have the opportunity to get to know each other talking. Tyler, do you want to continue with the silence, or you want to talk? Because they just run to the office.
I'll talk. I just did Tashita too.
Okay.
So
All right. Okay. All right. So you don't need it. I'm just asking because someone just wanted to get the buttons, and they only get 4. So therefore, okay, great, no problem. Good. Okay. Let's continue with dependence on parts. This is a subtler level. It's a little subtler than the previous level. That everything that exists has parts. So everything, permanent or impermanent, has parts. And parts are not physical parts necessarily. Even a characteristic of something is a part of it. So for example, a woman, and here in this explanation I said like she has countless physical and mental attributes that determine who she is. She is therefore not female by way of her own nature or inherently female, but exists as a woman in dependence on, for example, her mental preferences, her body, and so on. Right? Oh, I thought there were buttons. Look like very official now. Ronnie? Yeah, that's number 2. On and off, okay. All right. Okay, great. All right, so this is number 2, the second type, that everything, not only everything that is impermanent depends on causes and conditions, but everything that exists, including permanent phenomena, they depend on something other than themselves, which are called parts. So a woman, like what, we have a sense, I'm inherently a woman. But what makes me a woman is a certain preference or a certain mental state, and of course certain physical attributes. Based on that, I can say I'm a woman, right? It's not something inherent in me being a woman. Or take the example of a car. A car has so many parts, spatial parts. So of course a woman also has like physical parts. But thinking of a physical object is sometimes easier. So you have the engine, the steering wheel, and the tires. Then it has temporal parts. So yesterday's car, today's car, tomorrow's car, so in terms of existing in time. And it has attributes such as the car's impermanence, the existence of the car, the size of the car. Yeah. So similarly, we also have physical parts. We have yesterday's I, today's I, tomorrow's I. We have attributes. We have attributes such as we're tall, we are impermanent, we are the result of all different causes and conditions. So we have so many attributes that are not us, that are part of us. So the car's impermanence, its existence, it performs certain functions that are part of the car. And since it is composed of and dependent on those parts, we say the car exists. All right. Reflecting and meditating on this level of dependent arising, it facilitates the understanding of emptiness once again, because although the car exists in dependence on its parts, if we subject it to ultimate analysis by searching for some inherent car or some kind of essence or carness among its parts, we will not be able to find it. So yes, there are the parts, but there's nothing within it that makes it a car. And since there is no partless particle, like any part you can further, at least conceptually, divide again and divide again, right? Everything exists of something other than itself. Yeah? So there's no partless particles, or smallest moment in time, we can mentally dissect the car endlessly without ever finding a car. Although we have a sense that there's a car that truly exists in space and time, When we take apart the spatial parts of the car, we're unable to find a car that truly occupies space. Right? For instance, you see this car. I found this car. These are the atoms of the car. Where exactly does the car start and where does it end? I mean, this is of course not how we see the car. Can you see these little dots? I mean, of course, to draw atoms doesn't work. Yeah, I found this drawing. So these are representative for the atoms. So which atom is part of the car and which one isn't? Where does the car exactly end? Think on a molecular level or on an atomic level. Where do you start? Where's exactly the line where you end and something else starts? You can't determine. So to truly occupy space, does that make sense? Like this drawing here of this weird blue Mercedes. So really, of course, the atoms don't look like that. But how do you depict atoms? But you see these little dots? So actually, where does the car, where do the atoms of the car, are they as clearly delineated as they seem? Or is the car as clearly delineated in space? It seems so clear. This is where it starts and this is where it ends. But that's a very coarse level. On a subtle level, that doesn't happen. So it seems that the car truly exists in space and time. But when we take apart the spatial parts, we are unable to find a car that truly occupies space. When we take apart the attributes of the car, we are unable to find a car that truly possesses those characteristics. And when we take apart the temporal, the moments of car, right, we are unable to find a car that truly occupies time. So we always find something that is not a car. This whole thing I did with Deepak, you know, like I say I see Deepak. Where's Deepak? I point at Deepak. I point at something that's not Deepak. I think of Deepak. Well, I can't take everything to mind. Therefore, again, I'm thinking of something that's not Deepak. I say I see Deepak. So in the end, there are lots of parts. But where's Deepak? So the moment we start to engage in ultimate, that's already ultimate analysis. Right? I'm engaging in ultimate analysis. I'm looking beyond what just appears to me. Going beyond, like, okay, all right, we say I see Deepak. Okay, but where's really Deepak? The moment I start looking for him, it starts to disappear. But they can do the same with his parts. Oh my God, Deepak, you can't go. I need you as an example. Going back to Deepak. So, like, the moment I can take his body and do the same thing. Where's Deepak's body? I'm pointing at something that's not Deepak, right? I see Deepak's body, but again, I'm not seeing the whole thing. As well as saying, you know, Deepak is tall or whatever, but not every part of him is tall. So it's again, it's certain body parts, like, you know, having long legs and so forth, but if you have long ears, that doesn't make you tall. Okay? Therefore, when we look closer, like, okay, it's got parts. Everything has parts. A car has parts. A house has parts. We as people, we have parts. But then when we look, where's that part possessor, to use the Tibetan word? That which possesses those parts, the whole, W-H-O-L-E, the whole, can't be found. Where's that whole, right? So without really analyzing, yeah, we talk of parts, we talk of wholes, but the moment we start analyzing, whoa, it starts to disappear. Where's the car among its parts? Truly occupies space? No. Okay. It truly occupies time? No. Very difficult. Where's the present car? Where's the exact present moment? Can't find that. And there's no exact second moment, present moment. There's no past and future moments because they depend on each other. The past and the future depend on the present. And if I can't find the present moment, the exact present moment, you know, like even the present moment, it depends, it again consists of an earlier and a later moment, right? It's got sub-moments, each moment. So again, okay, not the earlier moment, not the later moment, the one in the middle. Okay, but that again consists of, so you can go on endlessly and never find the present. Never find a car. Where's the car? Point at it, point at something that's not the car, right? Okay, the car moves, but not everything is part of the car moves, right? Okay, the whole thing moves, of course, from one place to the next, but you don't say the seat inside move. You'd have a problem if the seats inside move. They move together with the car, yes. But also you sit in the car, but you sit in parts that are not the car. And of course, taking things like India, right? India, I'm in India, but not everywhere. So what is India? Is it just the soil? Is it the air? Indian airspace. So it must be more than that. It must be Indian airspace. But how far does Indian airspace go? If you like in space, like, you know, with a space rocket, are you allowed to travel over India? If it's, yeah, that I think you can do. So that's no longer part of India. How far does India go? What is part of India? Well, there's some disagreement, I guess, especially when it comes to Kashmir. Right? Some disagreement there. So what is it? Where exactly does India stop? Like the borders, for instance, to Nepal. So these atoms, are they still Indian or Nepali? Don't take them on the other side. That's part of, right? Where's exactly? It seems so clearly defined. On a map, that's easy. But in actuality, where's exactly? Is that still Indian? Is that still Nepali? Right? What is it? And is it from the side of the object? I mean, think of India at the time of the Buddha. We still call it India, but it wasn't India. It was just, there were lots of different kingdoms. Yeah, different, what would you call them? Yeah, kingdoms, I guess, right? Ruled by different kings. So what we now know as India, the question is, was the Buddha born in India or in Nepal?
Presently.
What is presently Nepal, right? Lumbini, yeah. But is it, like some Nepalis get offended saying the Buddha was born in India. No, he was born what's now, but was it India then? It wasn't called India, was it? I don't know. When did they start using the word? Anyway, the word in English is different to the word in Hindi. Bharava, is it India? Is Vate Bharat? Par. Oh, that's India? Okay, so you go. There you go. So when was it called that? When did it start being called that? Does anyone know?
2022 again.
Huh?
2022 again.
2022.
After the BJP was like,
After the BJP, okay. All right, well, anyway, yeah. So the point is, therefore, it seems to be so solid like this, but in actuality, who determines it's India? Who says it's India? The mind labels. And there are different labels, so it's not as clear-cut as we may think. Again, we have disagreement. There's some disagreement. Some people would say, you know, if you're from Pakistan, you say Kashmir is part of Pakistan. If you're from India, you say it's, so what is it? Right? From its own side, it's neither. But some things it's easier to understand. It really comes from the mind. It's a matter of conventions. For other things, it seems a little harder. For the eye, there seems to be so much more than a convention. But let's see. Okay, so there's no smallest moment. Again, as before, so for the latter, so for the time, there's no smallest moment in time. We're unable to identify an ultimately existent present moment of the car, since every present moment can be further divided into an earlier, middle, and later moment. Furthermore, on a subatomic level, it's impossible to tell where the car starts and where it ends, which atoms and subatomic particles are part of the car and which ones are not, right? But also, not only do phenomena depend on their parts, they also exist in relation to other phenomena. A woman is a mother in relation to her child. So to feel like you're inherently a mother, but you're actually just a mother because you have a child, right? A daughter is a daughter in relation to her parents, being female and being the child of parents. You call this a daughter. So if suddenly it was possible to make, well, if you could clone a human being, it is already possible. So is this person a daughter? Strictly speaking, not. If you're a clone of a cell of someone who has parents, that these parents don't make them your parents. Or maybe that's how it's used. They become your parents as well. You can end up having thousands of children because you have thousands of clones. But the point is actually you have no parents if you're a clone. So, or the cell it was taken from, those become your parents, hard to say. But it's a new concept for us. So we still haven't kind of established, is this a daughter or son or a child of something, or is it neither? Really difficult, right? A daughter in relation to her parents, a sister in relation to her sibling, and so forth, right? I mean, of course, being a woman, first of all, that's in relation to certain body parts, mental and physical, but being a sister in this case. If you didn't have siblings, or never had any siblings, you're not a sister or a brother. They feel, right? It was just Raksha Bandhan, right? So it feels like you're so inherently a brother or sister, but it's only in relation to other people. In the case of long and short, hot and cold, here and there, I and other, the two elements of each pair are connected in such a way that they exist in relation to each other and thus depend on one another, right? But if phenomena exist the way to appear to us, a woman could be a mother without having a child, right? It wouldn't depend on anything. You would just be a mother. A woman could be a mother without having a child. Because it's not dependent. It's not like in relation to someone else that you become a mother. No, you already are. It was inherent in being a mother. And a sister, without having a child. And a sister, even if she were an only child. So a woman can be a sister even if she were an only child. Similarly, a pencil or a pen could not be long in relation to one phenomenon and short in relation to another. And we could not be I from our own perspective and other from the perspective of someone else. If there was an inherent I, right? Okay, so I have some quotes here, but this is easy to understand. Nagarjuna in his precious garland, if there's long, then there's short. They do not exist by way of their own nature. Or Shantideva says in The Way of a Bodhisattva, if without a child, a man cannot be a father, from what has a child arisen? Without a child, a father does not exist. Right? Again, that correlation. So again, that is the second type. And now we'll start with the subtlest type. Dependence by designation, on designation by name and thought. It's just thinking something, you designate it. You think I, and therefore it's I. You designate. That is the hardest. Yes, Ashwin?
Geshema, I don't know if you would like to cover it, but I'm also going to speak about the parts of permanent phenomena, the second level.
The parts of permanent phenomena, okay. So they don't have spatial parts, they don't have temporal parts, but they have characteristics. They have characteristics such as they're permanent. So they depend on other phenomena, of course. The emptiness depends on, so that could be part of the dependence on parts. The emptiness of the table depends on the table. So the lack of inherent existence of the table only exists because there's a table. So in that way, that's also a part of it. It's dependent on that part. What else? The lack of inherent existence, one of its characteristics is that it's the ultimate nature of phenomena. That's also a part of it. Yeah? That is an object of mind. It's also a part of it. That it can be perceived. It's a part of it. Yeah? These are all characteristics. So they're not spatial parts.
But then uncompounded space. So space can have directions, but if you say
Uncompounded space. It's actually really weird that in English you talk about permanent space and impermanent space. In Tibetan, there are different words, right? One is called panang. That's impermanent space, what we call space ordinarily. And the other one is called namka, dumachigi namka. Yeah, so it's a different word. So it's a little confusing in English to say there's permanent space and impermanent space. So impermanent space is very easy. It's just that space all around us, which we can see. And this permanent space is really just saying the absence of something obstructing me.
So that doesn't have direction. You can't say that.
Well, it's located somewhere. It is located somewhere. For instance, this cup is not full to the brim, or even if it were. But let's say, in the space of this cup, I can move my finger. So the uncompounded space, that is the absence of obstruction in the center of this cup, is located in the cup, right? Or in the cup. So within the cup, there's the absence of obstruction. The space, the impermanent space, is the space I see. But the lack of obstructing something, that is called in English unconditioned space. Right? It's just the negation of something that obstructs me. And does it have a place where it exists? Yes, in the center of this cup. Because I can move my finger. I'm not talking about the space around it, but only in the cup itself. So even if if you had a lid, you would still have space within it. And seeing the space from a positive aspect, like from an affirmative affirmative perspective, it's that space inside that I can see. But from a negative perspective, it would be just the absence of obstructing something. Yeah. So you could say table is the affirmative thing, and the absence of table being a toothbrush, right? That is similar. Like this, the table, from seeing the table from a positive perspective, that's like seeing the table itself. But the table being free from being anything that is not a table, right? The table is free from being anything but table. So it's not table, in other words. So being free from anything that is not table. That is an abstract characteristic of this table that is permanent. Yeah. So with uncompounded space, pardon?
How do we write this thought?
Huh?
How do we even write it down, this thought?
Yeah, that's a very abstract philosophy. I know that's a little bit, but I mean, as long as it makes sense, if you don't write it down, but you can always find it in other books, right? So the table, the actual table versus the absence of being free from anything that is not the absence from being anything that is not a table still exists, right? The absence of anything, so it exists in relation to this table, but it's not the table itself. It's just the absence of not table. And both exist. In fact, the table can only exist when anything that is not table, so if the table is not anything that is not table. If the table is not, anything is not table. So in other words, the table is not a cup, the table is not a carpet, the table is not a person. So anything that is not table, the table is not.
We
Right?
don't think that way, and that's why.
It's hard for us to think in negatives. It's so abstract. But to understand emptiness, it's important to understand negatives. When we learn philosophy, most of what we learn, if not all of what we learn, is to understand emptiness. Directly or indirectly, it's meant to help us to understand emptiness, because it's so hard to understand it. So to understand negations, emptiness is just the negation of a characteristic that has never been there. And so we also deal with these non-affirming negatives, like negating obstructive contact. Here, obstructive contact exists. Right? It exists. But not inside this cup. Not inside this cup. This obstruction in that particular area here where I can move my finger, there's no obstruction in there. There's nothing obstructing my finger. So although obstruction exists in general, not in this cup.
What about the air?
Pardon?
What about the particles of the air?
But they don't obstruct me. I'm not saying there's nothing in the cup. I'm saying there's nothing that obstructs the movement of my finger. It's not saying there's nothing in the cup. Of course, there are elements, there are molecules in there, there are air molecules and light molecules. It's all in there. However, none of those obstruct me. So we're not saying the absence of anything in the center. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the absence of something that would obstruct movement, the movement of, for instance, my finger. So does that exist? Yes, but it's just a negation of something. Just a negation. or absence of Donald Trump on my table, right? I use Donald Trump. Why? Because some people would say maybe there is an invisible vase on there or invisible pen. So how do you know there's no pen? But Donald Trump is not invisible and he's not on my table, right? So, fortunately, no, I'm kidding.
He's not allowed to come anyway.
Pardon?
He's not allowed to come anyway.
No. All right. Okay, but the next one is really difficult. Designation, dependence on designation or labeling by name and thought. That is the deepest level of dependent arising. According to the highest philosophical view, Prasangika view, as it's called, it is on this level that dependent arising and emptiness really connect. The reason is that emptiness describes the way in which a phenomenon does not exist, whereas dependence on designation takes the same phenomenon from an affirmative perspective. Right? So this table exists. It doesn't exist inherently. So that describes the emptiness of the table, indicates that the table doesn't exist in a particular way. So it's showing me how the table does not exist as inherently existent. But how does the table exist? As a phenomenon that is merely labeled. So the whole exercise I did with you previously, this whole thing about I see Deepak, but I don't only see a part of him and da-da-da-da-da. I was trying, you hadn't learned this yet. So that's why you couldn't answer. Deepak is only labeled. On the basis of mind and body, or mind or body, any part of him, I label Deepak. So anything that has to do with Deepak's mind and body, I can label Deepak on it. I see Deepak's mind or body, I say I see Deepak. Deepak's mind does something, I say Deepak does something. Deepak's body does something, I say Deepak's body moves. Even if it's just a reflex. I'm not saying he has to do it purposely, but still it's him, it's his body moving, therefore I say Deepak moves. Beyond that merely labeled Deepak, there is no Deepak. Sorry. In fact, if Deepak existed in any other way, he couldn't exist. Deepak is just labeled. I is just labeled. There is no I. You see, remember in the very beginning, I once said, if I write a letter, there are certain body parts that are involved in that process. So just to keep it, actually I'm left-handed. To keep it simple, let's say, just for the sake of simplicity, my hand is writing. Really, that's what's writing. My hand is writing. So I say, actually my hand is writing. But every time to point at what is exactly doing that, it's easier to say, I'm writing. So I label I on my hand. Separate from that, is there an I that's writing? Then there isn't. There isn't. So when I'm meditating, my mind is meditating really. So on the basis of the mind, I label I'm meditating. And if I'm aware of meditating, there's a second mind that is now aware of the mind that's meditating. Is that the I? Well, for the sake of simplicity, I say I meditate. But I'm just labeling it on the basis of mind and body that I previously have agreed is the I. I create these conventions first. Like I was taught language when I was little. So in society, we call this a person. This is a person. This is a person. And then I was taught that anything to do with my mind, this body, this mind, these two are connected, karmically connected. So these are I supposed to refer to as I. So I start doing that. And then anyone else I learn, it's you. Okay? But then it seems to me, it's not just labeled, there's something more. It seems to me that there is an actual I. There's actually an I that is not just labeled. There's not just the thought I. Every time I see something that is either the mind or the body, it seems like I say I because it's already there. I'm not just labeling it, it's really there. And that's why I refer to I, but it's the other way around. Now, to give you some funny examples, some interesting examples. 2016, the day Trump was elected for the first time and Mr. Modi announced at 10 in the evening, next day the money has no value. A difficult day in my life.
You remember it.
I remember the day very clearly. Because I was listening to I was on my way out. It was in November. I remember I was about to leave India. And and someone asked me to buy a statue. So I had just withdrawn all this money. I think it was around 20,000 rupees from the bank to buy the statue. They had sent it to me and I had withdrawn it to now buy the statue. And at 10, I listened to the BBC and I get this announcement. And I'm like, shh. Oh my God, what am I going to do with all this money? It has no value. I have to buy the statue. Ooh, and I thought, okay, the only thing I can do is be the first in the shop, before the shopkeeper even notices, because it's 10 o'clock in the evening, he may not listen to the news. He may actually accept my money. So I told my friend, I just went to next door where my friend was, and I said, look, can we go there tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I'm in the shop. And I got the statue. He knew about it, but he said, I want to sell something. I can probably should get rid of the money. But the funny thing was, what previously seemed to be inherently 1,500 rupees suddenly had no value. So when the money was like, I remember like after a few days, and we got used to it, we have a water filter at the Nunnery. And I had someone, or I bought this little box so you can, because it was my job. I organized this water filter. So because it's expensive to clean it, we asked people for some donation every now and then. And so people would put money in there. And that day, when the money was devalued, I checked in the box and there were 500 rupees in there. And so I thought, I was like, oh. And so I thought, oh, it's interesting. The sense it's inherently 500 rupees, I had to remind myself, I had to relabel. But I thought I'd check how the nuns feel about it. So I put 500 rupees just in the middle of the table and waited for everyone. So suddenly there's just 500 rupees lying there on the table and you're still used to the old. So they came in, all the same reaction. So you see, with money, certain things, it seems, okay, it's the Indian mint gave the value to a piece of paper with a certain quality of paper, a certain print, and decided now it's 500 rupees, labeled that value. But before long, we get used to it, and now with the new money coming in, I'm still getting confused with the colors, to be honest, you know? I still, because then they changed, and they were 2,000, and they weren't 2,000, and then they're purple. The 100 rupees used to be a different color. I think they were blue, but now they're purple. The 500 green, were they always green? I'm not sure. They were yellow? The 5 rupees are still green.
Yes, 5, 10 and 20 are still the same.
No.
20s? No, 20? Aren't they pink?
20 pink.
20 is also changed, yeah.
Yeah, 10 also changed.
Become
Yeah, 10 is still brown.
Yeah, 10 is same, yeah.
In the beginning, actually, the money was so dirty when I first came. Wow, now it's so crisp and beautiful. But when I first came, they probably used it for a really long time. It was this, whoa, oh my gosh, right? Now it's so crisp. I guess it's really, they produce the money more often, but you know, they're sticking money together. It was because they wouldn't accept it. So with like glue, you couldn't use sellotape. So like put it on the table and put a little bit and then very carefully hand it to them and hope they didn't notice. I don't have to do that now. When do you find a 5 rupee and still they accept it? But anyway, the point is we had to redo. So if it was really in and of itself, if it was inherently 500 rupees, then we would always see it that way. You couldn't devalue the money anyway. Couldn't do that. And what's interesting are ideas such as the president. Like before Obama was elected as the president, right? There was no sense president. But before long, he became the president, and slowly had something presidential coming, right? It's only a name, it's only a label that's applied to him. You won't find the president within him. Of course, it was not an independent fact. I mean, you had to have certain qualifications. There had to be a certain procedure had to be taken, had to be all this had to be there. So you don't just decide one day he's the president. That's not how it works. It's not like creating it and deciding one day. No, there are causes or there are other factors, dependence on which we label. That's very important. But still, it's just labeled. And at some point, we labeled ex-president. Still seems to be there. I mean, until the day he dies, he's got almost like written on his forehead, ex-president. But you see that part where it seems like from the side of the object, there's something there, when in actuality, it's just labeled. So this doesn't seem to be a big deal when it comes to money. But recognizing it within ourselves, that's what's so fascinating. The I, it's just labeled. The I that we constantly believe there to be so vivid and so, oh, I have to watch out, my battery is really giving in. I have to tone it down. Okay, so believing it to be so real, when in actuality it's just labeled. The I is just labeled. If you weren't going to label I, or weren't going to, if I were to label two people and were to label them I, and everything this person did would be, then I would think myself together with that other person. And some twins probably have that sense of an extended person. Some mothers have a sense that their child is an extension of them. So even though you don't say I, you may say we, of course, but it's like anything that applies to that person applies to me. My mom used to say that, you're part of me, and I hated that. As a teenager, it was like, I'm not a part of you, I'm my own person, right? But she thought of me as being a part of her. Pardon? It's a mini-me. Yeah, a mini-me. And I was like, no, I'm a very separate person, right? It's just like the way we labeled, like I was like moving away from my parents, while my mom, for her, there's always that bond, and I'm always a part of her, right? So, therefore, it's just mental. It's just to do with the mind. Yeah? So let me continue with this explanation here, therefore. The reason is that emptiness describes the way in which a phenomenon does not exist, whereas dependence on designation takes the same object or the same phenomenon from an affirmative perspective, presenting the way in which it does exist on the subtlest level. It's just labeled. It's only labeled, right? It's hard to understand. Subtle because it's difficult to understand. Dependence on designation refers to the fact that a phenomenon is designated or labeled in dependence on a valid basis of designation. That is the parts of the phenomenon. You can't just make it up. You don't just call a cow one day and a donkey the next day. It's not like that. You need to have a valid basis of designation. For instance, from my mind, the valid basis of imputation for the I is a mind and body. So my mind that is karmically connected to this body, that I call I. I can't call you I. That's not a convention. That would be conventionally wrong to defer to Deepak as I and call him you. Because the one that is labeling and the body, like his body, I'm labeling and that's the body, but they're not karmically connected. Yeah? They're not karmically connected in that I was born into that body, which makes it incorrect. So it's not like a random giving names to anything. There are things that it's dependent on, that labeling. Very important. So you need a valid basis of designation. A table, for instance, if it has certain characteristics, I call it a table. If it's missing, if it's lacking those, it's not a table. Of course, sometimes the dividing line is difficult, a table, a chair, or whatever, but it's not a toothbrush, that's for sure. No one will have trouble to distinguish it from a toothbrush, because that is so different. Okay, so you need a valid basis of designation. You need a conceptual consciousness. Because labeling is just thinking, table, 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 I. And since we're always thinking, we're always reinforcing that labeling, that designation. And we label the world slightly differently. Beautiful, ugly. Whereas the other person is ugly, beautiful. So it's different the way we label things, because the basis of designation appears differently to us, right? If there's a pleasant experience when I eat something, I label it delicious. It's in and of itself neither delicious nor non-delicious, but in relation to how this food reacts with my nerves, in relation to my attitude, right? If I think salt is really bad for me and there's little salt in there, and I like the taste, I label positive, I label delicious. If there's too much salt in there and I'm worried about eating too much salt, even though I like actually salt, I label it not delicious, you see? Yeah, so it's always dependent on so many factors, but it's totally subjective, how I experience the food, for instance. So food is very, very, right, subjective. But other objects, we can all agree that this is a table. And again, whether it's beautiful or not is a different matter. But we can all agree this is a table, okay? When it comes to food, yeah, is there always agreement? Yeah, so we call it a banana or something else. Okay, we can all agree on that. So calling a banana or apple, independent of, so whether it's good taste or not, this is where opinions differ. But we would still call it an apple, calling it that, this and that and the other. Okay. So you need a conceptual consciousness and you need a name or term. Name here doesn't literally mean a word. It could also mean anything to refer to it. Anything to make us think about it, because our mind thinks either in words or in pictures, in imagery. So if you don't have a word for it, an image appears every time you think about it. You have to think about, there's always something appearing to the mind, and it could be a visual image, it could be the memory of a sound, or if you know the word for it, you actually refer to it that's what it appears. So this is called a term. Although literally speaking, the image is not a term. Literally speaking, the sound isn't. But how do you put it into words, right? So we use term because we usually use language, and once you're proficient in a particular language, you do use that language to think. You think in a particular language. As when you were children, before you learned language, of course you weren't doing that, but we have no memory of it. But again, I remembered, I mentioned before this neuroscientist who contracted meningitis and fell into a coma and recollects having these visions, but he had no language. He had no words. He had thoughts, but he couldn't put them into words. He had lost his ability to use language. I guess the subtler mind wasn't affected by, it was a subtler mind than the ordinary mind. It wasn't affected by words. That's why when we die, a subtler mind arises, and since you never go back to the coarse mind from the previous life, you forget the language you learned. You no longer remember the language that you spoke in the previous life, right? Unless you're as homeless as the Dalai Lama. Because the story goes, when he was a little boy, he came from a place called Amdo, where they have a very thick dialect. They don't speak that dialect in Lhasa. But when the search team came to search for him, he could speak the Lhasa dialect, although no one in his family or in his neighborhood spoke the dialect, but he could do it. He could speak to the person in their dialect, and they were like, wow, this is a special boy. How can you know this dialect? But usually, as ordinary people, we lose the ability. So sometimes in your dream, you may not be able to think in words because the mind is too subtle. But then it's probably difficult to remember later on, or maybe just remember imagery. In the case of this neuroscientist, he had very vivid memories of seeing things, but having lost the ability to lose language. And sometimes people, of course, when they're in a coma, it takes some time. When they come back, they have to relearn the language, because the mind that was very subtle, that was not part of our language ability, was present for so long, you lose it. But usually you get back to it because the mind was not totally lost. But when you die, that coarse mind, you don't go back to that, you lose your ability to know the language. And then in the next life, of course, what's possible if you learned a lot of languages, you may still have the talent. That moves on to the next life, right? You may still have that. However, you lose the ability to speak and understand. Okay, so name and term. For instance, a flower exists as such because it's designated in dependence on, for instance, the basis of designation, the flower's petals, the stem, the leaves, arranged in a certain way and performing certain functions. So think this was an actual flower, because it doesn't, no, it doesn't, it smells like, not like flower. Anyway, it depends on these parts, on performing a certain function and a conceptual consciousness plus the term flower. Right? In other words, based on the parts of the flower, the conceptual consciousness designates or labels the flower by thinking, for example, this is a flower. Okay? So depending on the fact that the petals, the stem, and the leaves of the flower appear to the eye consciousness, a conceptual consciousness, a thinking mind arises thinking, there's a flower. Right? And since we share that view, flower, we all agree, we learned it from others to see the world in a certain way, therefore we all agree, flower. Yes?
That's actually a perfect example because it's a fake flower.
Yeah, it's actually a fake flower, right? But of course, if it was the real object, but it doesn't perform the functions exactly, so it doesn't look exactly the same.
It's not fake. It's there in your hand.
But it's not a
flower.
It's not a flower, exactly. It exists.
Yeah.
But it exists, we label it a fake flower.
Plastic flower.
Pardon?
Plastic flower.
No, it's not plastic, by the way. It's not plastic. It's some kind of weird, it's got some polyester in it, but it's some kind of flexible, kind of cloth-like, I don't know, like a tablecloth kind of material that is waterproof. I don't know. I don't want to mess with it too much. I'll break it. It's actually, I thought it was real when I saw it. It's pretty good. This is not, is it from the West, these flowers? I haven't seen this quality here. Though they're very good. This is definitely from the Mela. I said Mela before. Mela. And they're pretty good as well. Getting better every year. Okay. This means the flower exists. It is a flower because a conceptual consciousness labeled flower independence on its basis of designation. So we all agreed what a flower means. And if something has these parts and they're arranged in a certain way, I'm not talking about throwing the petals here and the rest there. That's no longer a flower. But being arranged in a particular way, or not being arranged, like existing in a certain way and performing therefore the function of a flower, we call it flower. But to find the flower among its parts, well, you can go on endlessly, you'll never do. Because it's subjectively it was just labeled by the mind. And whether we call it flower or anything else, anything we call that whole, it's just labeled. But the parts themselves, they're also wholes. They're made of parts other than themselves. And they're also labeled. And so you never find anything from the side of the object, which seems to be hard to believe. How is that possible? What is then the difference between you and I, really, when it comes down to it? That's what's so hard to understand. That's what's so difficult, right? But okay, anyway, so another example is a $100 bill. Due to the specific quality of paper, engraving, and coloring, the United States Mint labels $100 on a piece of paper, thereby giving it a specific value. The $100 bill does not exist from its own side, but in dependence on such designation by name and thought, right? Similarly, the I. The I exists in dependence on a conceptual consciousness designating I on the basis of body or mind, which are karmically connected and perform particular functions or activities. The I exists because a conceptual consciousness labels I in dependence on its basis of designation, and other than the merely designated or conventionally existent I, no self can be found within the body or mind. That's why I can say I see Deepak when I don't say Deepak. That's why I can say I touch the table when in actuality I'll touch something that's not the table, because I labeled table on that part. And as long as there's a fully functioning table there, I can say I'm touching the leg of the table. But when that basis of designation, when it's taken apart, and you no longer have a table or something that performs the function of table because the parts were separated, you no longer call that the leg of a table. Leg, sure, why not? But no longer leg of a table because there's no longer a table. There's nothing to perform the function. And so even though we say we eat chicken, strictly speaking, we eat the flesh of something that used to be a chicken, strictly speaking, because it no longer performs the function of a chicken. It's very quiet, that dead chicken, for instance. Okay. The conceptual consciousness labels I every time it thinks of the I. So we reinforce it, I. Every time it has the thought, this is me, on the basis of the appearance of body or mind, I'm sick on the basis of the body being sick. I meditate on the basis of the mind meditating, and so on. A conceptual consciousness designates I. And we believe that there's more than just the designated I. There's truly something there that needs to be gratified, that needs to be protected, and that is more precious than anyone else. This is our trouble. This is the trouble. This is the reason for all our trouble. It seems to be so simple. So simple. But if you think what it gives rise to, it's like the butterfly, the wings of the butterfly causing a hurricane. So, it seems to be so minor, such a tiny mistake. Wouldn't it be easy to correct it? Well, theoretically, yes. But practically, the mind that holds on to inherent existence is so powerful that it's very difficult to fully understand. Because when you start thinking about it, you'll have a lot of questions like, wait a minute, that's all? That's it? But it feels so real. It feels so real. When you insult me, if I now were to insult you, you'll still be offended. Automatically it feels like, me? Why did they say that to me? How dare they feel, this is personal. And we just get as upset as before because we haven't internalized, and that's the hardest bit. That's what's so difficult. Tyler?
I feel like we could observe animals having preferences, so potentially there's some concept of an I with them. Is the evolutionary usefulness of why we all have this sense of I, is that to help us become reproductive organisms and like pass on offspring? Like, is there a use? What do the evolutionary biologists say on like this concept? Or like, is there a usefulness of I other than like procreating? Because then we're like,
oh,
I
right.
want to hold on to it, I want to put more of me in the world, and then animals have that as well.
Okay, you see, Buddhists don't really think like biologists. Like everything has a certain benefit and so forth. From a Buddhist point of view, it just is, you know? It's like, yes, well, of course there's some benefit to make sense of the world. Just that we label, that is very helpful. But is there a benefit of believing that they're intrinsically this, that, and the other? Well, it's the root cause of all our trouble. What benefit is there, right? So biologists like to find a benefit of everything, even anger and even, right? But, and they're surely right in some ways, but I'm not sure. Anger, but you see, like biologists now, initially they thought anger was a good thing. That's how we survived as a species. Now they know we survived because there was compassion. So they definitely realize, okay, because people worked together and they helped each other, that's why humans could survive. So I'm not sure they would still say anger is good for you. But there was a time when they said, okay, when someone threatened your family, you could fight them. But anger is not always a good thing, because if you start having anger among your family members, you definitely have a problem. So from a Buddhist point of view, it's not about, it's beneficial. We're so used to for instance, I love these ideas. Why do we like sweets? Because in the past there weren't a lot of sweets, so there were fruits, and fruits gave us energy. So they were important for our diet, so we learned to like them. This is why we still have the taste, we still like sweets. Or why we avoid to climb up a staircase. Well, because as when we lived in caves, basically, when we walked on the plains of Africa, for instance, to climb up a mountain and climb it down again was a waste of energy, and we didn't know when we got the next meat, the next mammal we could kill, so preserving energy was important. And you wouldn't voluntarily waste energy, because food provided us with energy and food wasn't always there. But nowadays, that same tendency to avoid any kind of hardship has actually become a problem. So I heard scientists say that's the purpose for that. But that sounds a bit like this Mother Nature creating things, when in actuality it's just like those who had it survived and the rest didn't, right? But I don't think here it provided any, it's not about survival. It's not about, so we can't see the world exactly like, you see, biologists just look at it from the physical point of view. It's mainly the physical, the emphasis much more on the physical. Buddhists are much more on the mind. So could it sometimes be helpful? Sure. If you had some suicidal thoughts and your attachment to the I saved you, that was good. So it could also sometimes, in some cases, maybe even save your life. But in general, it's seen as the root cause of all of our trouble. So yeah, I don't think we have that same mechanism with biologists, right? That it serves a purpose. Glad we have self-centeredness because it kept us alive as a species. I don't think that's true. I think we would have survived. This world won't be such a mess if we didn't have self-centeredness. Right? There wouldn't be overpopulation, there wouldn't be war, there wouldn't be any global warming if we didn't have self-centeredness. Yeah. So it didn't actually, I think it's actually, we're doomed because we have that attachment to the self. And we're as intelligent as we are. Yeah. Those combined are a dangerous combination. Yeah. Okay. All right. So every time we have a thought, we designate. We constantly reinforce our labeling. Yet although conceptual labeling is necessary for a phenomenon to exist, we can go until 5:15, right? Because we started later. Okay. Although conceptual labeling is necessary for, I can give you this text if you want. This is actually on the True Truth. I put this together and then you can read it at your own time. I'll make it available and send it to Venerable Penjala, and if you have a group or something, WhatsApp group or any other way, you can have it. It's on the True Truth. I put this together, so maybe if you want to read it again. So although conceptual labeling is necessary for a phenomenon to exist, it is not by itself a sufficient requirement for existence. Designation by consciousness must occur in relation to an appropriate basis of designation. That is why there's a difference between mistakenly labeling snake on the basis of a fake snake. So they usually describe like a coiled speckled rope. Although nowadays they're rubber snakes. In fact, I was a really weird child. My parents, they gave me during a mela, we call it Kirmes, but that's actually a mela, the way you know it now with like fun rides and stuff. So my parents somehow gave me this rubber snake. And I carried it around as other kids carry around beautiful teddy bears. I have pictures with this disgusting rubber snake until I bit on it and I chewed on it, and eventually the head came off, and then I bought me a new rubber snake. So like I've got this childhood pictures with rubber snakes. No beautiful. I had a teddy bear, but I wasn't carrying that around as obsessively as that rubber snake. Right, never mind. So, but anyway, that wasn't a snake. It looked like a snake, but although I may have labeled it snake mistakenly, like let's say you have like this fake rubber snake or a fake spider. It looks like a spider, and you label, spider. That's a mistaken label, because that rubber spider does not perform the function of a snake. It doesn't act like a snake, like a spider. Or the rubber snake doesn't. Therefore, just labeling is not enough. There must be a basis of designation that is such that what we label it aligns with what we use the label for, that what we've agreed to, for instance. Like, what is a snake? How is a snake defined? And a rubber snake does not fulfill that because it's not even alive. It doesn't even have a mind. So there's a difference between mistakenly labeling snake on the basis of a coiled speckled rope and labeling snake on the basis of the mind and body of what is conventionally accepted as a snake. So you see there's a difference. In the first case, that fake snake, so if it's the rope or the rubber snake, is not the basis of designation of the snake, for it does not perform the function of a snake. Whereas in the second case, the snake aggregates, or the snake body and mind, perform the function of a snake and thus are suitable basis of designation. Hence, even though anything that exists is merely designated, merely labeled, whatever is merely labeled or merely designated does not necessarily exist. It goes one way but not the other. Because the snake, the rubber snake, that is dependent, that is labeled in the, so the snake that is labeled in dependence on the fake snake, that is an example of something, it's not a snake. The rubber snake is not a snake. However, and now this is very important, please listen carefully. However, both the snake designated on the basis of the rope, so both the snake designated on the basis of the fake snake and the snake designated on the basis of an actual snake body and mind are similar in that they cannot be found as existing independently of designation, and they're the same in not being inherent in the fake snake or in the mind and body. Both are equal in that way. So one can be conceptually called a snake and the other one cannot, but they're equal in that you can't find a snake in either of them. Find the snake within the rubber snake. Okay, can't find that. Or within the rope, can't find the snake. But even in the actual snake, you don't find a snakeness. It's only labeled, right? So I have this picture I created for that. You see, this is actually a rope, and this is a snake. This is a rope, this is a snake, and it goes, that's a snake, that's a snake, in both cases. But when you look closely, one is actually a rope, and one is a snake. Both are labeling snake. And in both cases, you don't find, from the side of the object, you don't find a snake. But conventionally, one is a snake and one isn't. Wow, you guys seem to, I don't think you're faking when you're nodding. I can tell when you're confused, you stop nodding. Oh, it's gone. All right, okay, wait. Yeah, because the power is so low, I have to make it lighter. Okay, wait. Okay, that again. Can you see? Okay, that's the snake. That's the guy going, oh, snake. But one is actually a rope, and the other one is an actual snake. Can you see it clearly? I can also, do my trick? Yeah. You would have to hold it like this, or wait, let me lock the screen. Ah, it's fine, I still got 24. As long as I switch, I go down. So you see, can you find a snake in either of these objects that the person is scared of? No. They're both labeling, but nothing is there from the side. So the snake is not a snake from its own side. It's not this, it's not that. It's not an animal from its own side. It's not a living being from its own side, unless we were to label. So whatever you say about this thing, it's just labeled. But we have a sense there must be something from the side of the object. There must be. But there isn't. There's nothing you can point at. But the lower Buddhist schools, who find that too extreme, too difficult to grasp, they say, yeah, there's something you find. So that's why you have the lower schools, because it's very difficult for us to really understand there's nothing that can be there. Yes?
So you said there needs to be some relevant basis.
Yeah, some valid basis.
Valid basis for the labeling.
Mm-hmm.
Does the valid basis come from the
It's also merely labeled.
That's also like from previous labeling. The valid basis is
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to say when did you label, but yeah, first you must have a valid basis. You must know, like for instance, we define objects, right? We give it names, and at some point someone decided this object is called a snake. So they had already labeled onto this slithering body, I guess, already labeled, you know, animal or whatever. But now they draw this distinction between this and other animals. So for instance, cobra. So maybe you had the label snake first, but then you saw differences between cobras and what other pardon? Pythons, yes. Yeah, pythons. So a python and a cobra. Maybe in some cultures it's just snake. In other cultures they give different names based on their different characteristics. So they're all labeled snakes, again, on the basis of seeing the similarities and previously having labeled that, but then later on, more distinctions are made. We see more differences, right?
And the characteristics themselves are labels.
Pardon?
The characteristics
Yes.
themselves are labels.
Yeah, the characteristics are labeled as well. Let's give the example of what are characteristics, for instance. Yes, please.
With the conventional snake,
Yeah.
because it performs the function of
Yes.
the snake, it generates fear. You don't want to be around that.
Right.
Whereas the rope does not perform the function of a snake.
Triggering,
In that sense,
it doesn't trigger fear.
it doesn't trigger fear.
Yeah, exactly. Just not just that. One moves, the other one doesn't. One bites, one doesn't. One eats, one doesn't.
So even if you say the snake is not really there, conventionally, the snake exists and it will perform its function unless you get out.
Exactly. It's still going to bite you.
Right.
Of course it's going to bite you. But the thing is, it's important to understand that it doesn't exist in and of itself, that you still need the mind. So what's important to understand, that it exists, it performs a function, but that function is also merely labeled. Because to bite, it needs something to bite, right? So it's not in and of itself that it bites something. So it's again dependent on something other than itself, and someone labeling biting. So even every action, for instance, walking, all right? Walking, I'll give you another example. Walking, where is it? Oh no, it comes later. Okay, for instance, let's say activities, coming and going. Is it coming or is it going? Well, you see, coming and going, it's walking all together, but it's again in relation to where you stand. If you're here, it's going, and this one is coming. If you're on the other side, it's the other way around. And then think of walking. They're just moments in time. These are just moments in time. So the foot is raised and moves. None of these moments is walking. But all of them taken together, we label walking. Right? So activities, walking. Okay, actions, thinking. Just having like an image appearing is not thinking. Thinking means like there's some activity going on. Like each moment is slightly different. That's when it becomes thinking. It's just labeled. Yeah? So labeled on these activities, we label mind. Okay? So knowing, experiencing. So everything we do, we label. And our whole reality is dependent on that. Our reality is what we've labeled. If we haven't labeled, it doesn't become our reality. If we've never given it thought, using a symbol to get at the object, it's not part of our reality. And again, what is reality? It's the sum of our thoughts. Right? And there are quite a few philosophers. There's actually a book that says reality is thought, or there are other books like that, and have nothing to do with Buddhism. A lot of people have recognized that, how everything is dependent on the mind, and in particular on our thoughts. Right? So you don't need to look for Buddhism. Like these mathematicians that say numbers are nominal. They're just labeled. You have two objects, right? Okay, take these two, you label one, you label two. Can that two-ness be found from the side of the object? No. Is it conventionally two? These two things, so a pen and a lid. Are they one object or two objects? Okay, now one, now two. I've separated them purposely. Okay, so these two things, or take the chocolate. Okay, put it back on. 1, 2. It's two, right? You label two. Can the two be found? No. But do two exist? Yes. It's labeled, it's not, you have a valid basis of designation, 2 objects. If I were to say 3, that would be a mistaken label. So there is, in accordance with reality, it's in 2 and 2 is 4. It's still labeled, but you can't, it would be mistaken to label 2 and 2 are 3. That would be mistaken. So there's consistency, there are rules, there are laws of nature. We live in a world where there are certain, I mean, gravity, for instance, it's a law of nature, and that does exist, but it's nevertheless still labeled, just labeled. So therefore, because phenomena are labeled, they exist. In fact, if they weren't labeled, they couldn't exist. It's as far as doing that. But that is so hard to understand. So on a conceptual course level, initially it makes sense. But then when we think back in our daily life, the way we experience things, it doesn't seem that way. Not at all. It doesn't seem that way. And that's the difficulty, to bring it onto a level that it affects our actions. That requires a really deep understanding to bring it into our actions. But the moment we can do that, anger will no longer be able to control us, attachment won't control us, and life becomes easier. Really becomes easier. Okay, but anyway, let's just do the last bit. But both the snake, designated on the basis of the rope or on the basis of the fake snake, and the snake, designated on the basis of the actual snake body and mind, are similar in that they cannot be found as existing independently of designation and as inherent in the rope, or inherent in the fake snake, or inherent in the actual snake. That is why, or the actual snake body and mind. That is why the masters of the highest, the Prasangika school, gave the example of labeling a snake on the basis of a fake snake in order to illustrate the 3rd level of dependent arising. We label it, but it can't be found. So there's a quote by Chandrakirti, never mind. But conceptual consciousness not only labels things in dependence on their basis of designation, it also designates them in relation to and dependence on other phenomena. For instance, a man is labeled a son in dependence on parents, grandson in dependence on his grandparents, brother in dependence on his sibling, father in dependence on a child, and so forth. So our sense of identity here in this picture, so the person is thinking, I'm a son, I'm a grandson, I'm a brother, I'm a father, right? In relation to these beings around them. So labeling is not just on the basis of mind and body. You need a basis of imputation. That you always need. So just being male, I'm making it a grandson versus a granddaughter. You need to have the mind and body that is associated here with the male. And that's where it's interesting with people with gender morphia, it's called, I think, like when you... Dysmorphia. Gender dysmorphia. So when you feel like you're a man, but you're trapped in a woman's body, or vice versa, what are you? Well, I guess it depends on definition. But for those, I think the male, it's mind over body, it's a mind, I think. So it's mind over body. And nowadays people have accepted that as well. It's not like you force someone to be male when they feel they're, so it's mind over body. It's very, very clear that, especially with gender dysmorphia, where people change their gender, that is understood. That part is understood. People no longer say it's body over mind, right? That used to be like that. You're a man, what are you saying? What are you doing? Even Tibetans, who used to be very rigid in that way, they have a transgender person they're very proud of now. She's very famous. Do you know her name?
Something with M, I'm not able to recall.
I'm also trying to think. She's got a Japanese name.
She's very tall.
Very tall, yes. And there are pictures of her online when she was a monk. Even then, Mariko. That's right, Mariko. There's even a pizza in McLeodganj called Mariko Pizza at Oma restaurant.
Yeah, old restaurant is where you can find it.
Yeah. So she's become very famous, but she had a hard time when she was younger. People telling her, you're a boy, you're a monk, act like that. But she said, no, I'm not. I'm trapped in this body. And now, because Tibetans can quickly change, right? So Tibetan society was quite old-fashioned not so long ago, but they're very flexible because they use the Dharma, and if they understand reason, they can change. And oftentimes the monks and the nuns, they are more familiar with the Dharma. They change, and then the rest changes as well of the monks and nuns, because there's still, there's respect for monks and nuns. It's not just monks and nuns. I mean, Tibetans in their whole culture, because Buddhism has taken hold so strongly that it's very much influenced that culture, and they can be very flexible when they see reason. But anyway, so, okay, here you have son, grandson, and so forth, given that you, okay, and then that's determined basically by your own preference, and then your physical basis as well. Apart from being labeled a son, grandson, brother, and father in relation to his parents, grandparents, sister, and daughter, respectively, the man is not from his own nature or inherently a son, and no sonness, grandsonness, and so forth can be found among his mind or body. That's why you can look forever and you never find anything, because it didn't come from the side of the object. It's subjective. It comes from the labeling. Similarly, okay, a pencil is labeled long in relation to something shorter, such as a matchstick, and short in relation to something longer, right? Such as a ladle. See, the ladle, the matchstick, yeah? Short and long do not exist in and of themselves, and are not found from the side of the pencil. Long or short, there's no longness or shortness within this object. There's no pen, but there's no long and shortness either. It's in relation to something, you call it long. Relation to something else, you call it short, again. But it's not just labeling, that's important. You need more than that, because if it wasn't like that, then it would be like in mathematics, just created. That's important to understand, because oftentimes we think it just comes from the thought, just from the mind. But you need a valid basis of imputation, which of course is also just labeled. And its basis of imputation is also just labeled. You can go on endlessly. And this is where we go, but there must be something there. Then that's when it gets hard. Yeah? Because without something longer or shorter and without conceptual labeling, these properties would not exist. Just as the pencil is not inherently a pencil, none of its properties exist objectively, and thus independently of being merely designated by thought. In short, all phenomena arise and exist in dependence on countless other phenomena. Therefore, they do not exist objectively and from their own side. This is true for persons, bodies, minds, and even emptiness itself. Even labeling itself, for qualities such as long, short, big, small, good and bad, for continuities in time such as weeks, months and years, and for activities such as talking, thinking, coming, going. Oops, something's missing. Because the picture, okay. Yeah, this is the problem. It's still moving around. I have to find the PDF of this. Anyway, they're just labeled for these categories, somehow disappeared. With regard to the latter categories, so coming, going, and so forth, they consist of various temporal processes, like walking. It's always a continuum in time. So temporal processes on the basis of which they're merely designated. Oh, on the basis of these temporal processes, on the basis of that, we label activities. The word merely implies that phenomena are designated without existing truly, that is, without existing from the side of the object, or in addition to, or inherently within their basis of designation. They exist conventionally, since they're labeled in dependence on common conventions. The moment we start to search, for instance, for an I that can be located precisely in space and time, or that exists separately from its parts and designation, we engage in ultimate analysis and thereby in the search for an inherently and ultimately existent I. Since such an I cannot exist, it cannot be found by ultimate analysis. Even the merely imputed I, cannot be found by ultimate analysis. For if it were findable by that type of analysis, it would have to exist inherently. Yet, although there's no inherent I, it does exist, because it exists conventionally, which is sufficient for it to exist. In fact, it cannot exist any other way. Okay, done. Yes! It's 5:15, yeah. In Germany, we don't say 5 p.m., we say 17. So we use the military time. So it's at 17:50. No, it's 5:15. 5:16 now. Yes, Gita?
There was one sentence you said, if I want to get rid of anger and attachment.
Yes.
And I missed it, and I want to.
If I would get rid of anger and attachment, then?
We have to do what if we want to get rid of anger?
Take a sleeping pill. No, I'm kidding. No. Well, we have to understand emptiness. If we really want to get rid of it, because our attachment and our anger, they only work if we believe there's an inherent negativity from the side of the person. I mean, let me give you just a simple example. Because we believe there's someone is inherently bad, then we're angry. But if this is only possible if you don't see anything positive in them. If, let's say, you're angry with someone, and I were to tell you this person saved your life in the morning, you just don't know. You cannot be angry. You can't be angry because suddenly you see a different side. Therefore, in that moment, that inherent badness can no longer function because inherent means at the exclusion of everything else. It can only be bad, not good. So if the mind, and I'm not saying another mind doesn't know, but I'm saying the mind that's angry only functions by thinking this person is inherently bad and nothing else. Only then can you be angry. But if you understand it's merely labeled as angry, in fact, what someone calls angry, what you call bad, someone else calls good. Right? It's not good or bad in actuality. It's only in relation to us. And therefore, this activity, for instance, I don't know, in our culture, to eat your food and go, excuse me for that. That was too much. Doing that is very rude. But in Chinese culture, I've been told, it's very polite. The Tibetans, Tibetans as well, of course. Yeah, the more delicious it is, the more sound you make. Tibetans still do that. Tibetans really do that when they really think they're. In Germany, it's very rude to be. It's impolite. So what is it? It's neither making a lot of noise when you drink your tea, and even go. That's very rude in Germany. It's so rude. But here it's polite. It's a sign you like it. You go walk, like you burp, right? It's burping. Burping is so impolite. Is burping impolite in India?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
No, you should see Indian uncles.
Pardon?
They're like, "Ooh," and then Hari Om.
Hari Om?
Yeah, they always do Hari Om.
Like they take the name of the god.
Yeah.
Hari
And
Om.
they burp on your face.
That was good balapanya. Okay, that's interesting. Is farting bad? Because I had this Indian guy walk in front of me and he went right in front of me and I'm like, it's not considered bad. No?
That was something Rinpoche always made a joke of.
Yeah.
Remember, whenever Rinpoche talks, and he said, and then he farted, and Rinpoche would laugh.
Tibetans think do it down is very no. Tibetans think it's bad. Yeah. If you fart in front of a lama or something, it's funny. They still think it's funny when someone prostrates and it goes, it happens. It's like, hoo. So you shouldn't. No, you don't fart. That's very rude to fart in a room.
But it's human.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are
The
human.
more you control, the louder it goes.
Yeah, but the poo in someone's room is also human, and no one. I mean, come on. It's human to poo in a room, but yeah, well, The point is that I'm just saying, like, it's not inherently, it's neither good nor bad. But when I was little, my parents told us, in fact, when I eat, we have to put both hands like this. Both hands. In India, no, under the table. In our culture, when I put my hand underneath the table, my mom scolded me. It goes here, right? Both hands, and not like this, right? And then you eat. The hand goes like this, elegantly uplifted. Not like this, like this. It's kind of weird, right? Well, what makes it good or bad? That's just how I learned it. And I don't know, maybe it's just my parents who did it. I have no idea. This is the truck driver. So when we ate like that, my mom said, "You're not a truck driver." You know, truck drivers, they eat like that. So you see, the thing is therefore good or bad. And what makes me angry maybe if someone burps, another person would be very pleased. But it seems to be inherently bad, inherently disgusting for some. See, again, if I understand empty, so is it this or is it that, bad or good, or is it, because it gives, usually it's like, it's not just the thing itself we see to exist inherently, but good or bad seems to. That's what the anger arises because I perceive it as inherently bad. That triggers an unpleasant feeling, right? Or I don't know, maybe there's an unpleasant feeling because there's a physical reaction that is unpleasant. That's also possible, and I label negative. Or I have the sense this is impolite, so I label this is negative, and then there's an unpleasant feeling. Whichever way it goes, the point is that negativity leads to anger. And it seems to be inherent in that, or inherently good, which triggers a pleasant experience. That leads to the sense it's inherently wonderful and I want to be around it because it gives me happiness. It made me happy, so now I believe this happiness is within the object. If I'm just around it, it'll trigger that happiness, and therefore the happiness is inherent in them. So I don't want to be separate from happiness. I want to be around that person. Okay? All right, great. We did everything. We did the 3 types of dependent origination. Now we can go into more details. But I also feel comfortable to let Deepak go, having these 3 types, and hopefully it's helpful in some way. And we'll continue, of course, tomorrow. Okay? All right. Okay. One question?
No question.
The discussion group. Well, dependent origination. How understanding this helps us to overcome the afflictions. That's the main thing. That's most important. How it makes life easier. In how many ways? Oh, I haven't given you the example of this lady yet. Never mind, I'll leave it for now. I don't want to stretch it too much. I'll discuss it tomorrow, and maybe you have the chance to listen to the recordings. Anyway, so we'll do that tomorrow. But yeah, that's what I really want you to discuss. How is this relevant? The 3 types of dependent arisings, because they're so big, they're so important. Right? Does that make sense? And then you reorganize the groups as we discussed. Great. And you can talk unless you wear this. You could take a piece of paper. Great, thank you. Oh, wow, why did you do that? Very good. Okay, let's dedicate, right? Or you could do the dedication tonight as well, or do you want to dedicate? Yeah, let's dedicate. Okay. Just in case you're too hungry. No. All right, again on page 31. And so let's again think whatever positive potential, whatever merit and wisdom we accumulated today together as a group by listening, discussing, asking questions and so forth, may that become an important cause for all of us, each one of us, to slowly, fully come to understand these different concepts we learned, in particular emptiness, so that with a mind that directly realizes that experiences emptiness, eliminating whatever is in the way to not only become liberated, but also to becoming a Buddha, so that for the benefit of every living being, we are able to guide all of them to the state of a Buddha, or at least have the potential to do so, to reach that same state. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayer. May the precious bodhicitta arise, if not yet born. When generated, may it never diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, thank you.